Well, good evening and welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for May 2nd, 2019. Tonight's agenda has a number of items that the City Council will consider in order to continue to conduct our city business. We do have guidelines for conduct at the City Council meetings, and they're also available at the back of the council chambers for those in attendance for tonight's meeting. Continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal of the council chambers. You will have a couple warnings. We need to be able to hear everyone in this room. And the first item on our agenda is a call to the audience for the issue review session and committee of the whole items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the City Council. If you do wish to speak on an item, could you please fill out a speaker's card, which can be found in the back of the council chambers. And I'll call your name when it's your turn to speak. I'm going to go in the order that I've received them. The first one is Deborah Ortega. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Good evening, I'm Deborah Arteaga. I'm the Executive Director at Tempe Community Action Agency. I'm here to address the proposed Human Services funding recommendations for fiscal year 2020. A little point in time, back in 2003, when TCAA was serving 10,000 Tempe residents, our Human Services funding allocation was $40,000 more than it is today. And I'm sure our amount in terms of what it was today versus several years ago isn't any different for our nonprofit providers. There's no question that over that time, city demographics have changed and social needs have changed significantly. This isn't about TCAA's allocation, it's about human services funding that's available for City of Tempe residents throughout the community. We're asked when we provide proposals for human services funding to be conservative and to be realistic in our requests, and we do that in our requests. We don't inflate our requests, but the way that the formula is used now to make final decisions on funding starts with a reduction process. So if we were to submit proposals asking for level funding for serving the volume of Tempe residents that our agency serves, we wouldn't even be able to meet existing or stay at current funding levels in our organization. We would be cut continuously year after year after year as the population we're serving increases year after year after year. Evaluation should be giving more consideration to the volume of city residents served and other funds that organizations are bringing to the table to leverage City of Tempe funds to serve more people in need. If the budget cannot be increased, then let's dig deeper into the cost effectiveness of the proposals that are submitted and the impacts that these funds have in the community and the population served. And in terms of cost effectiveness, we need to look at broader allocations of funds for human service needs. When we think about using City of Tempe general funds for positions and for programs and services, it should be a competitive process to look at the most cost-effective, innovative, and outcome-driven models that serve the highest volume of Tempe residents possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Deborah, I'd like to ask you a question. You said that in 2003 you received, was it 40,000 more in money than you do today? Was that what you said, or was it 10,000? Yes. 40,000?
40.
And do you know how many individuals you served back in 2003? Do you have that number?
10,000.
10,000 back, and then how many individuals are you serving now?
22,000 seniors, adults, and children that are Tempe residents.
So more than double.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next is Barbara Lloyd.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Barbara Lloyd. I'm a Tempe resident and the current chair of Tempe Community Action Agency. So I am here, obviously, representing the board, although this is not a formal appeal to the agency review process, and in no way is this an adversarial type of an address to the council. It was more just an opportunity to bring the council aware of the major impact, obviously, that TCAA as an organization has on this community as a partner in providing human services, and the major concern I have in seeing, the amount of people that we serve go up over 134% in the last decade, and then funding actually go down by about 11%. So I have been a part of the agency review process probably 6 or 8 times over the last decade, so I'm familiar with how it works, and I definitely respect that process. This was more of trying to bring to light a larger approach of how we provide human services in the city of Tempe and embracing the nonprofit partners who have effective and efficient services in place and making sure that they get funded at maximum capacity so we can provide the integral and sometimes the only human services in the city of Tempe, such as homeless shelter. So I just wanted to make sure that that council was very aware as they consider the agency review recommendations that will come before you this afternoon. I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to recommend, Councilman Navarro, you're on the phone, correct?
Correct, I'm on the phone.
And Councilmember Donna Savage will call in a little bit later. Okay, next is Elector Thompson. Welcome.
Hi. I'm Electa Thompson. I'm here as a board member of Tempe Community Action Agency and as a resident of Tempe. I don't want to echo the same exact things that Barbara said, but in a sense, I'm obviously here for that same reason and those same concerns. I appreciate and respect the way that the agency review process is done, and I would say that my concern is that in the critical services that TCAA provides and the comprehensive way in which we do that to be cost effective, to serve more of the residents here, I ask that we maybe consider as a council that when you are thinking about these things and considering these things, you consider the way that we do that calculation and look at the number of people that we serve, because I want, I want to advocate in the sense that as a Tempe resident, I want this to be done in the most cost-effective way, and please consider the amount of funds that we do if that's where it comes from. I feel like Barbara did a good job there of saying what I want to say, but I'm just here on behalf of TCAA and as a Tempe resident too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Seth Chalmers. Please state your name, place of residence for the record.
I'm Seth Chalmers. I live at 1451 North El Camino in Tempe. I'm a civil engineer, and I'd like to make a statement to the mayor and council in support of Vision Zero. I applaud the mayor and council for becoming the first jurisdiction in Arizona to adopt Vision Zero. In particular, I would like to compliment the passion, leadership, and work that the city traffic engineer, Julian Dresick, and his team have shown and done on this most important cause. I'm very excited and hopeful for the future of transportation safety in our city. It reminds me of the words of the famous structural engineer, Leslie Robinson, who said, "Remember, the sanctity of human life rises above all other values." I am hopeful that other jurisdictions in Arizona will follow Tempe's lead and make a commitment to Vision Zero. I believe one of the most important features in achieving Vision Zero is developing a long-term, say 10 to 15-year implementation plan and process that includes dedicated funding each and every year. Certainly, I believe the commitment to Vision Zero will help direct funding the city already has and can be supplemented with federal aid grants when and where possible. However, I do not believe this will be enough. Instead, what I believe needs to be considered is some form of annual set-aside Vision Zero only funding that would be specifically targeted to implement and accelerate Vision Zero safety initiatives sooner instead of later. I'm not sure how this funding would be achieved. Should it be a Vision Zero bond program? Should it be a set-aside from sales tax? Regardless, I would urge that this be made a part of our Vision Zero implementation plan.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Caslick. Caslick, right?
Yes.
Great.
My name is Jeff Kaslik, and I reside and work in Northwest Tempe. I'm a bicyclist 98% of the time, so I fully support the Vision Zero resolution that the city adopted. I'm really interested in seeing how we execute the recommendations by the Traffic Commission or the Transportation, Julian's staff. Just wanted to come and speak about that and say you've got some support out in the streets. And I noticed Mill Avenue is going to be closing in about 2 weeks, and we thought we could just leave it closed. Be a pedestrian mall? No? Okay.
We tried that
Thank you.
years ago. Thank you. Next is Mario Martinez.
Good afternoon. My name is Mario Martinez, and I live in Tempe, and I'm here to address the council replacement issue. In looking for a council replacement for Kobe Granville, Tempe needs to look to the future and not to the past. Granville was ousted after evidence was publicly disclosed that he raped and sexually assaulted female minors. Replacing Granville with a professionally competent woman is a great idea. Of the 3 council replacement finalists, 2 are highly qualified women who would be exceptional for our community. Arlene Chin is a finalist that I support. Shireen Lerner is excellent as well. Ms. Chin's exemplary civic commitment and public integrity are indisputable. Also, as an Asian American in our community, Ms. Chin provides Tempe with a unique opportunity to present the views of that important demographic, as well as others on the council. Regarding Don Casano, I am not sure how many members of the council were living in Tempe and politically active in Tempe issues when Mr. Casano was on the council, but I was. I remember it very well. I have no problem with how Mr. Casano has served the Tempe commissions after he left the council. But when he was on the council, it was a different story. In addition to being a council member, Mr. Casano was an unsuccessful mayoral candidate in 1994. I was hoping that this would exclude him from being a finalist, but apparently it has not. When Mr. Casano was on the council, he had a public record of bullying Tempe residents.
Mario, we're not saying any disparaging comments. I said that in the opening remarks. You could talk about the positives and your opinion, but when it comes to disparaging, can you please refrain from doing that? Thank you.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I said bullying. Is that, let's see.
Okay. I'm just asking, consider that you have a process that we're moving forward with. And I just want to make sure that we're above board, and go ahead and continue.
Okay. All right. Let's see. And there were, I'll skip the next section, but like I said, I got the firm information for what was there. It was part of the public record, and that's part of the reason why he was an unsuccessful candidate. And I have a problem with council members, basically, like I said, bullying, the residents, and I have some tangible legal evidence to support what I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
I just want to say that all of these 3 individuals have served the city so well, and they've stepped up to lead, and I think we should focus on the positives, of which there are many, about all 3 candidates. I'm not inviting you back up to speak. Sorry, I just wanted to say that I just deplore that kind of attitude. Thank you.
Next speaker, Ms. Jennifer Schick.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Schick, and I live in Tempe. I wanted to let you know that I'm here to voice a strong support for my friend and colleague, Arlene Chin. I have known Arlene a very long time, in fact, since we were student workers at ASU way back when, and we have really been the best of friends ever since. I feel lucky enough to have known her for that amount of time, but I also feel lucky that I've been able to work with her for almost 20 years now. I want to share with you one small story that personifies Arlene's ability to grasp challenging situations, quickly assess them, and then offer some really great advice and guidance. I work at ASU, so a few years ago, as part of my job, I was at a freshman retreat with some ASU students. They made some poor choices, and I was faced with a very difficult situation. Some of the students, but not all, had made some poor choices. Once I found out about it, I could have gone with sort of my automatic knee-jerk reaction, which might have made me feel better in the short term, but probably wasn't the best thing for anyone. I didn't know how to find a way forward, though, so I called Arlene. She listened to my situation, asked a few questions, and really helped me hash out a better plan that allowed for the students who had made those poor choices to understand completely what they had done wrong, but it also allowed for the students who hadn't done anything wrong to hear a message that didn't make them feel like they were being punished. And it made me feel good too. I was able to do something that was positive instead of simply punitive, yet allowed me to be direct and authentic. To me, that exemplifies Arlene. She is able to thread that needle of figuring out the right thing to do by listening, quickly and expertly identifying an issue, and helping people figure out the right course of action for them. Arlene didn't tell me what to do, but helped me figure out what was really best to do in that situation. She has done that for so many people as long as I have known her. I urge you to appoint Arlene Chin to Tempe City Council. While she is the staunchest and most supportive advocate for the city that you will ever come across, she is also that unique person who listens with both ears, processes situations quickly and adeptly, asks great and pertinent questions, has excellent assessment and guidance skills, and always, always looks for ways to build an ever stronger community. I hope you will select Arlene. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Sam Barr. Sam Barr.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Sam Barr. I reside at 6105 South Villa Drive in Tempe. I moved to Tempe in 1971, and I own a small manufacturing company that employs 35 people here in Tempe. I'm here in support of Shireen Lerner as to be a member of the Tempe City Council. I could go on for a long time. I've known Shireen for a long time, and I could give a fairly thorough presentation on her capabilities. I just wanted to say that I've known her since she was a graduate student, and we worked together at Arizona State University. Later, I worked with her when she was the State Historic Preservation Officer, and I was chairman of the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee. Later still, I worked with her when she started teaching at Mesa Community College. She's been an active member of the Tempe community for as long as I've known her, and she's worked closely with the Tempe Historical Museum and Tempe Community Council. I ask that you seriously consider appointing her to fill the vacant position on City Council. I know her well, and I am certain she will do an excellent job for the citizens of Tempe. She will provide a much-needed perspective on historic preservation and development. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Sam. That's all the cards I have. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close that portion and move on to our issue review session. First item on their agenda is the Tempe Community Council's 2019 Agency Review Recommendations. If individuals can come on down. Nathan and Ms. Vega.
Thank you.
Push the button.
Here we go. I'm Kim Van Wigan. I'm the Community Impact Manager for Tempe Community Council. And tonight joining me are Nathaniel Pretlow. Nathaniel, who's in his 5th year on the board of TCC, currently serves as Vice President of the Board of Directors. And he is the co-chair of the Agency Review Enhancement Committee, which is the governing body of the AR funding process. Genevieve Vega, also in her 5th year on TCC's board. She too serves on the executive committee, and she's a member of the agency review committee. Special thanks to Mike Berkeley, who served as the co-chair for the AR committee this year.
One of the most
There we go.
One of the most public roles of Tempe Community Council for the past 34 years has been to administer and manage the distribution of human services funds on behalf of the City of Tempe, known as agency review. What makes this process unique, a true community effort, and much more than simply a grant process, is that TCC mobilizes interested community members who work and/or live in Tempe to bring agency review a human touch. TCC works with citizen volunteers who dedicate their valuable time over a 3-month period to reading and evaluating human services proposals, interviewing prospective agencies, and making funding recommendations to the City Council. This process is arduous, eye-opening, complex, and rewarding for everyone involved. The City of Tempe, through Tempe Community Council, stands head and shoulders above our sister cities for the high level of citizen involvement in the human services agency funding process. This citizen review also removes the politics from the process. To expand on this, TCC's mission is connecting those in need to those who care. The process was created to encourage community members to be a part in making the decisions about where and how human service dollars are allocated and prioritized, and, as I said before, to take the politics out of the process. This process helps ensure that agencies are performing with excellence, and they are. This year, they are meeting their contract obligations, they're writing very good applications, and preparing well for their interviews, which is making the competition tough and is challenging us to keep exploring new ways to score applications with increasing objectivity and to further define what the scope of work that should be prioritized. Citizen panels lead these efforts. They recommend funding, they engage in important discussions, actions, and solutions to community problems, and they give of their time. We often learn that they make generous contributions to agencies and other funding outlets after having served on the agency review process. The work of the agency review directly supports the Tempe City Council Strategic Priority 3.10. Genevieve?
Great. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you, Mayor and Council. All of this effort is really directed towards serving the 6 target populations identified here. We know that people don't fall nice and neat into each of these categories, and categories frequently overlap in co-occurring conditions. So that is why we ask the community in a survey which population they feel is the most critical need of services. The population, the communities response was in this order here: homelessness, working poor, domestic violence, individuals with disabilities, seniors, and youth. And as council can see in their packets of information provided to you, there are a number of agencies serving all of these populations, providing critical services in areas that, again, serve these target populations for Tempeans in need. To expand a little bit more on the participation and the results of our engagement of the community, this year our survey alone had 453 responses. This was given out to human services providers, city departments, including our first responders. It was given to the community at large through social media, and we promoted it very heavily. The volunteers this year came from these populations, and they also, the volunteers all live or work in Tempe. They were comprised of a wide cross-section of individuals, including professionals from for-profit and nonprofit organizations and agencies, business owners, public school administrators, City of Tempe staff, ASU-affiliated staff and instructors, pastors and other faith community leaders, retired professionals, mental health professionals, a police officer, and an ASU student. So we really had a good representation from the community here. And as you can see here, we had 49 agencies apply for funding, and 5 of them were new this year. 58 programs in total were requesting funding, and 6 of those programs were new for us this year. As Nathaniel mentioned, the process draws our residents in to participate in a rigorous and transparent process to come to the final recommendation that we bring to you today. And a conservative estimate of volunteer hours here, we had 48 volunteers in addition to the 453 responses that participated in the agency review process. And a conservative estimate of the hours they contributed collectively is over 1,000 hours to this process. We're all aware in this process, it's very human. And, you know, we all have feelings that we bring into this process, but we are bound by the dollars we have available. We're aware that the need for quality services is greater than the funds available, and we are extremely grateful that the City of Tempe gives so generously to this process and human service work in general. And in fact, human services funds have increased over the last year, as Kim will share with you.
Oh, thank you. We're just over 2 million there. The initial recommendations from the reviewers, 1856837, that means we were unable to fund $635,000. But the good news is we were able to fund 94% of the agencies that applied for funding. You look here to the right, you'll see the chart to the right shows the FY 18-19, and looking at this year, the general funds, they're at $1 million. The CDBG funds, or the Community Development Block Grant funds, are stable there, nearly the same. And please note that the CDBG funds are broken out in your packet of materials, since the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the HUD, requires that HUD sub-grantee risk assessment tool be used for review and scoring of those applications. The Human Services Department worked in conjunction with DCC on the review and scoring of these applications. And you also see here that Together Tempe funds have increased by more than $10,000 this year, and the display panel revenue is projected at $93,205. Nathaniel?
The scoring criteria includes the application score and interview grade, and the prioritization score assigned by the results of the community survey. Scoring is weighted. Application score and financial scores are weighted and added together. We converted the interview grade to a score. For example, if they had scored 98.6 points, then it became 98.6%. And then we also used the Human Services Survey that merged the results from the stakeholders to get one list of priorities in order of most to least critical.
Daniel, we have one question, Vice Mayor Cubey.
Yes.
Thanks. Just a question. And, I realize we're not going to redesign the scoring criteria for this round of funding, but every year we either improve or there's an evolution in the way we score and an improvement. So I do want to ask about some of the questions that raised about the scoring criteria. In the future, is it possible, and I realize your committee deals with these things, to add a point or two for impact, number of people served, and possibly add a point if there's a cost match or if there's funds that are leveraged in addition to the funds that come through the city? Is that something we could look at for the next year?
And in fact, it is something that we can look at for next year. And Genevieve will talk about that on one of our later slides that talks about that very issue. Every year, we're always trying to improve upon the process. And anytime the council gives us a recommendation, we always include that in the process. And as Genevieve will talk about soon, we are still in the process of doing the postmortem from this year's process.
Thank you.
So on to the next slide, please. To reduce request by around $600,000, the attendees of the final consensus meeting generated the following reduction formula and applied it to the initial recommendations. It is important to note that in the past, we used to use a step-down range to cut funding, but at the recommendation of council, this year, we successfully created a smoother method of reduction so that there would not be any large percentage gaps to the funding. Another important change was that the consensus team agreed on a formula without knowing any of the agencies that the numbers were tied to. In other words, it was a blind process, a blind reduction process, and this made the formula truly objective. Many options were discussed to determine a methodology for the agency funding allocation. We started off with looking at what's known as a red line method, where you fund at full funding until you run out of money. For the community members that participated, it was determined that they did not prefer that method and that they really wanted to fund more. They saw so much need in the community that they wanted to fund more and try to figure out a way to do that. So we then had 5 other options that we looked at subsequently, and the one that we ended up choosing, I will go over with you.
Wait, Nathaniel, can you wait 1 second? Vice Mayor Kuby?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, just the questions are pertinent to what you're saying now, so I wanted to ask. So as I recall last year, and I could be wrong, there was a sort of a green, yellow, and red, and the green, did the green get funded to the request, or was that also reduced?
The green, yellow, and red from last year was part of our 990 financial review.
Right.
And what they were looking at there was to see how healthy the agency was.
Right.
We did continue to have the 990 financial review with additional questions that were determined by our finance committee and made it a much more robust to be able to look at their financial health. But that green, red, and yellow only really applied to the financial review. The goal of full funding usually was based solely upon the type of score they got. If you got a higher score, then you would get higher funding or more funding. And if you got a lower score, then you would get less
And
funding.
I remember the issue being like if you went from, I thought it was green to yellow, someone at the bottom of the green and the top of the yellow, their amounts awarded could be so vastly different, whereas in the yellow was very close in score to the green. It didn't make sense, and that was a lot of the reaction.
That was when we had and I don't have last year's numbers in front of me, but I'm going to use, for example, if you're in the 90 percentile, that a person or an agency that had 90.5 as their score, and another agency that had 89.5, that the 90% had a 16% reduction, if I remember correctly, from last year. And I don't remember what the next one was, but let's say, for example purposes, that it was a 21% reduction, that was a big jump between the two. And so what we ended up doing, and when I explain this reduction formula, you'll find that, in fact, it is smooth all the way down from top to bottom, and that there is no grouping where, because you made one group, you did significantly better than the other. And we also tried to make sure that we always favored the highest scores as opposed to the lowest scores.
Thank you.
So on this slide, what you'll see is that we did cut scores that were below 75. That also was at the recommendation of council. And then the next thing we would do would convert that score to a percentage. So if they had 98.6, as I said before, that would be 98.6%. And we would multiply that times the recommended funding. Then after that, we multiplied a factor that you see here to get the adjusted initial recommendation. Following that, to ensure that the lowest reduction was no more than 65% for the lowest score, it resulted in the factor that you see there on the slide, to narrow the spread of the reductions. Just one moment.
Councilmember Adams?
How did you get the initial recommended amount?
The initial recommended amount was, we would take the 40% of the score was the application review. All the volunteers would read the applications. They would score those. The finance committee actually did the 990 review, and volunteers as well scored those. Then the next part is the interview, which anybody who had read the applications participated in the interview process. The agencies came in. They were given the questions in advance of what it was that we wanted to ask them generally. There could be some last minute questions, but generally they knew in advance. And there is that score, and then the last 10% of the score was from the human services survey that the community filled.
For the priorities?
For the priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next step was that we adjusted the recommended amount by multiplying that factor to achieve the final funding recommendation that I was just saying. And finally, what we did was we did calculations to verify that we achieved what the community believed was a fair and graduated reduction to final funding recommendations.
Fantastic. Nope, one more time. Okay, so as we mentioned before, every year we go through a very robust debrief, a postmortem, a retrospective, however you want to look at it, because we believe in continuous improvement. So we brought up many additional considerations for incorporating into next year's process already, but we're still receiving feedback from our agencies and from community members who volunteered. So we'll incorporate those and modify accordingly. And as Nathaniel mentioned, when council makes recommendations, we definitely consider that in our process as well. So some of the things we've looked at so far are looking at prioritizing to achieve collective impact. And I think, Vice Mayor Kuby, this was something that you mentioned about impact. That could look like a number of things. Could, not necessarily this is what we're going to do. This could be a scope of work for agencies to reply to. This could be contracting for specific outcomes that align closely to specific strategies. It might also support agencies that have a continuum of services that provide services for more than one population or co-occurring conditions, like I mentioned. We've also looked at refining application for improved scoring. There's always room for improvement in having applications that can be objectively measured through a rubric. We also are looking at monitoring programs and defining best practices for populations served. This could look like having agency performance be a larger part of the application scoring process, the impact that they make. We've also looked at improving contract performance outcomes and indicators. And that could be something like providing additional technical assistance or just refining the performance measurement and tools. So we have a number of options on the table that we're looking at. And Agency Review Committee we meet all the time. And we also invite members of the community to serve on that committee as well. They do not have to be a board member specifically. So the next slide here, because we've mentioned this so many times, I want to just take a minute to thank the volunteers. Some of them are in this audience, so if you participate in the agency review process now or in the past, I just sincerely thank you for all of your effort. This process works because volunteers contribute their time.
To Ms. Vega's point, those that, if you see your name of those that volunteer, could you please raise your hand or stand up so we can recognize you? Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Yes. And this, again, a ton of time and effort put into this from members of our community. And this process works because these individuals contribute their time, their talents, and their experience in crafting these types of formulas and providing us the feedback for the agencies. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
I also want to thank all the volunteers that participated. This is a great program. It sounds like it just needs a few little minor tweaks, and we'll keep perfecting it. So the number of, this is my question, so the number of clients served was not factored into the formula. So if one agency served a lot of people and another agency served 10% or 90% less, let's say 90%, that wasn't factored in, or was it? I'm just trying to understand it. This is my first agency review, so, okay,
I'll
thank
try
you.
to. Yes, it is factored in. In fact, when the reviewers are looking at the applications, they're asked to look at a number of different things. There's a rubric that they use as kind of a cheat sheet, a help sheet for them to consider this. And that is definitely one of the things they look at. So looking at the number of Tempeans served and also looking at the cost. And that is discussed often inside the interviews that take place with the agencies.
Okay, so it is a factor.
It is.
It's weighted. Okay, thank you. And also, many of the agencies, it appears, are serving similar populations. And so we have a lot of different people applying for similar services. Has there been any talk about combining agencies to make it more efficient and streamlined? Because I know the administrative costs, it's a lot to have all these agencies with all their costs out there. Have we looked at that, or can you give me a report on it?
I think you should take that one. That's the collaboration piece. Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, we do that in a number of different ways. We have roundtables, I think you may be familiar, that we meet with all of the agencies. That's an opportunity there where we talk about how they can collaborate with one another. We can have a continuum that they're working on with one another. It definitely is, there's room for improvement there, and we're definitely going to be working on that in a number of different ways. But I think that in terms of, are we duplicating? Are there agencies that are duplicating services? You know, this was my first time through the agency review, so I've been looking at things very carefully in that way. And I would say that I did not see duplication of services. I saw duplication of populations, but they may have been doing very different things. So the name of the agency doesn't always tell you what they're doing or what we're paying for. Because often what the city of Tempe is paying for in terms of program is some very specific piece of it. So I agree with you. I don't think we should be duplicating. We should be collaborating, and we definitely will look at that always.
Well, even if they're not doing the exact same service, but you're servicing similar populations, it seems like it would be cost effective to streamline those and maybe combine some of the agencies.
I agree, and I think we are looking at ways in which we could do that in a number of areas. I'm just going to mention one in particular, and that would be working with the number of agencies that are getting food to people. And how are they getting food to people? And is it possible that we could have one contract for them to work together on? So yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You know, I want to thank you all for your presentation and all the volunteers. You know, the main role of the Tempe Community Council is to administer the agency review process. And I got to tell you, the agency review process is really at the center of what we've done for human services for over 33 years. And it was really designed in a way to take the politics out of it, that was mentioned earlier, of the process. You know, we had, if you look, there was over 50 volunteers that have really devoted their time to figure out how to distribute the limited amount of money, which is $1.2 million. I want to point out, you may have heard me say this before, of the $1.2 million, we by far fund more than any other city in the valley on human services need. In fact, 32% more than any other city closest to us when it comes to human services. Really the agency review process, you know, as was mentioned, we're always looking at ways to refine it and looking at different ways to score, and we've done that, and I would appreciate what has happened. But it's also really important that we really make sure that the process is transparent and reflective of the community priorities, which you have outlined in the presentation. I want to thank you for that. But the 1,000 hours that, over 1,000 hours, I think it was 1,053, I think was estimated, that's tremendous. And I want to applaud our volunteers for the tremendous work and dedicated to the human services needs, because we are a community that cares, and it's reflective of how we have a line item budget. And we also, for the last 3 years, since 2017, the council approved to add an additional $200,000 for the next 3 years to help with some of the needs that we have. And that's continuing to this time next year is when we're going to be looking at assessing and evaluating how we can move forward with where we are. So thank you for that process. Anyone else have any questions?
Just one more comment.
Councilmember Adams.
I'm sorry, I jumped again. The population, I know the population of Tempe has really increased, and it's going to continue to grow. And I think we need to look at how much our funding has been and how much our needs are as our population grows. I know that we did do the $200,000 the last 3 years, increased funding, and I think we need to really look at that number and look at increasing that based on our population growth in the future.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
So as you know that I know the Tempe Agency Review is a point of pride for our city, and we are the only citizen-based advisory board, I think, left in Arizona that advises and recommends funding. So this is a real point of pride in our community, so thank you for all that. And I know that during the recession, when other cities were cutting back, we held steady, which to some may not seem wonderful. You want to always increase when there's more need, as there was in the recession when there was a tsunami of human services need, but we held steady. And then beginning in the fiscal year of 17, we added $200,000 to the agency review budget, and we're in the final year of that. I hope it's not the final year of that, but as council approved, it is the final year. But we do have a 31% poverty rate for our children, and for adults it's 21% or 25%, Kim? So yeah, we have a high rate of poverty. I think one of the highest poverty rates in the state, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I realize when you look at the formula, we're not about to go change the formula. People have to play by the rules they agreed upon. But I also think we should consider an increase for this fiscal year, and obviously not to go to one agency, but to be distributed according to the formula. And so I wanted to ask you, Ms. Vega, would TCC be available would they have a way of distributing those funds? And this wouldn't be a political decision, it'd apply to everyone, and it'd be according to the way the citizens decided, but would you be able to distribute those funds if there were increase to the agency review budget for this next fiscal year?
Every time. Thank you, Vice Mayor Cubey. That is entirely the intention of the formula. Whatever dollar amount that is available to fund the agency review process, that formula is applied to the dollar amount, whether that dollar amount goes up or down. So if delightfully more funds were available to fund human services, the formula would be applied and the numbers would certainly change, but the numbers would change up. So a rising tide would lift all ships in this instance.
So I want to say thank you so much for that. So Barbara Lloyd wrote to us, and one of the bullet points really struck with me. She wrote, general funds are being used to create new positions in the City of Tempe Human Services without adequate assessment of existing and more cost-effective nonprofit service providers capable of delivering the same or more comprehensive services. I know we're just at the beginning of looking at our general fund budget, and we're wanting our values to be reflected in the budget. That's basically why the city does a budget, why city council members have a say in the budget, because we represent the citizens. We're elected to be leaders and represent the citizens. And so I hope that we could take the next few weeks to perhaps look at our supplemental requests and look at perhaps some ways that we could shift some funds over, maybe from human services, maybe it would come from somewhere else in the budget, but we could shift them over to increase our agency review budget allocation for this year. We've seen that needs have gone up in our city, they're not going down, and we really have stayed pretty stable over the past 3 years while we've seen an increase in need. I think this is something we need to address. Thank you.
I just want to say that I agree with Vice Mayor Lauren Kuby on this issue. I do believe we need to look at other avenues for increasing our funding with this, given our incredible needs out in the community.
And I appreciate that as well, because we did that in 17 because of the need and the services. And I think we all have seen that in Maricopa County alone in the last 2 years, we've seen an increase in unsheltered homelessness by 27%. And it's a regional issue. It's not specific to one city. And I know that just going through our CIP and our general, our general fund budget and operations budget that we have, we only have so much money. And with that being said, we're doing the best we can. Not even all the agencies that we have in our departments, when they come to us for supplementals and CIPs, they don't get funded 100% of what they're asked for. And we have to make recommendations based on our priorities and so forth. And if there's ways we could look at that, I know if we went through our CIP and looking at, yeah? Yeah? You okay? Yeah? Yeah? But my point is that when we're looking at the dollars that we're allocating, if we add additional dollars, we have to take something away. We just went through that with our CIP, with the Clark Park Pool, for example, with the arterial right-of-way walls. We need to point that out. We're happy to look at it, but if you add somewhere, something else is going to get taken away less funding. That's something that I know as a council that we need to be cognizant of. Councilmember Navarro?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, obviously I think this is great that we get this review every year. It is a great service that we provide for our community. Hands down, by far, we're probably the #1 city that really actually puts money towards things that our residents actually do need. It's tremendous. It really is tremendous. And we continue on trying to up that value. I think logically with what the mayor said and what's being said with the other council members and vice mayor, if we have the ability, can we achieve more? Hands down, I think we can. But I know that with the process we're going through and what we're going to go through next year, starting early and starting this information early is helpful for us, because we know that this is on our radar, and how we're going to be able to strategically supplement it is going to be a conversation that we're going to have throughout the year. As you know, through council's process, we often come up with just #1 ideas. I'm sure I have great ideas and down the road, and it costs money. So we actually got to look at ourselves on what we're trying to achieve as council members. Obviously, we're hearing from the community on a variety of different needs, and we hear it all the time. And we try to start these work groups to tackle those issues. And we have to know that even with you guys doing the same thing, we can't be redundant up here. So we need to make sure that we're not doing something that's stepping on your toes at the same time that we could probably give you value on a lot of those things. So I think this really kind of starts the conversation, but we also need to make sure that when we go into the next year, if we're putting priorities on certain areas, this, in my opinion, is a good starting point to make sure that, is this a priority for the council? Then let's pay attention to it, and let's be cognitive of what we're trying to achieve for the following fiscal year. Because we got a lot of core values with with a lot of core infrastructure or core concerns that our city does with the growth of our downtown area. We just did a groundbreaking for Ryan on the corner of University and Roll. Our infrastructural needs, our public safety needs are going to start kicking up. But also our needs for the community are going to start kicking up. So I just want to be cognizant of that, and for us council members to know what we're getting into as we go to our next fiscal year.
Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you've done. I know this is a rigorous process, and you had 48 volunteers, over 1,000 people hours that went into this process, and it's not easy to pick who gets what and when. That's kind of what politics is all about, right? And you guys have done a fantastic job of taking the political considerations out of it. I think that's very, very important. You've done a fantastic job of laying out the rationale behind what you've selected. This is not a process that I take lightly at all. I'm very impressed with what you guys have come back with, and I'm happy to support your recommendations. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
So when you think about it, human services requests and supplemental requests come in independently from agency review. Now we have the agency review requests, and there's shortfall, because I know that having worked in agency review, people would love to see more funds come into that budget. But shouldn't there be an integration where you kind of look at the supplemental requests from human services and agency review and make sure it's integrated and makes sense? And So I would hope that we'd have that conversation before the budget gets finalized. And again, I would like to request that we look for ways that we could increase the agency review budget for this year. And I'm not sure we have the consensus on that. I've heard from Councilmember Adams, but I'm not sure about the rest of the council. I'm talking about looking at it and looking for ways, because we have a couple more discussions about our general fund, including one May 16th, I believe.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I'm concerned that there's duplication of services between human services and then what our agencies are providing out in the field. And I think that we need to really, I would like to see some kind of presentation. I don't know who would give it to us, but as far as what the agencies are doing and then what human services is doing, and make sure that we're not duplicating our efforts. I just want it to be as efficient as possible, because the more efficient it is, the more money we can get out to the truly needy in our community.
I believe if you can, I think we could provide that information, the question you just asked, in a Friday packet, because I think we have addressed that.
We had a joint.
Go ahead, Ms. Vega. The duplicating of, the agencies versus services. And I know, based on information I heard earlier in the presentation, that has been addressed, but we can get that in a memo form for you to have address that concern.
And let me let you know that we work very, very closely with the city's Human Services Department.
Okay, yes, so we can have that in a memo,
Yeah.
packet. And also, I am in favor of increasing our funding for this next fiscal year, because I'm just concerned that we haven't been keeping up with the percentage of population that our community is growing and the needs that we have in the community.
Okay. Is there any, first of all, I think the recommendations you guys did and the work that all the volunteers did on the agency review process has been great. The funding is another issue, and I would look to the rest of the council. I know where we are right now, and I know we're going to be looking at funding for the next year, because we're still in the 3-year process that we've increased our funding for human services by $200,000 a year for 3 years. So we have one more year left, which is this year. And this time next year, we're going to be looking at how we would 17, 18, and 19, and then how we are going to be funding that moving forward based on the needs that we're looking at. Because we've already have increased it. The council gave that direction in 17.
3 years ago.
But this is a 3-year process. So then of that, this is the last year of that, and then we're going to be looking at next year. I think it'd be an appropriate time, considering what we just went through our CIP budget, unless we can find some miracle and Lauren, we all win the lottery or something.
My point, Mr. Mayor, being that we've seen an increase in homeless population and homelessness problems regionally and in Tempe in the past 3 years. There's been a rather dramatic increase. And so that's why I would say that just, can we find a way, we're not voting on anything tonight, but can we find a way to look to get more funding into the agency review budget? I mean, that's why we have the budget process, so we can discuss, is this meeting our needs? Is this not? Does this reflect our values? Does it reflect the highest community priority, which I believe was affordable housing and homelessness?
Will this compete with, we also have $5 million in supplemental funding that has not been funded, requests that we have not funded in our budget. So that's part of, no different than what we did with our CIP, how we're going to have to figure that out. And if you want to look at that, that's fine, but keep in mind, we have $5 million in unfunded supplemental requests in a city that fits all of our priorities, as well as human service priorities. Okay. With that, I think.
Well, I think we need to discuss to see if we have a consensus to look at more. Nope.
I'm fine for next year. Thank you. Next is Vision Zero update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Julian Driesing. I'm the City Traffic Engineer.
Oh, one more, there we go. And I'm Lieutenant Jim Peterson, the Tempe Police Department's Traffic Bureau.
So we're very excited to be here to give you an update on our Vision Zero program. The City of Phoenix recently went through an exercise to look at Vision Zero. Unfortunately, they didn't move forward with that, but it just really invigorated me and really made me excited about how visionary the city of Tempe is, and that I get the opportunity to work in an organization that really puts a priority on the safety of not only myself, but when I look around the room here, everybody in this room. And so I'm really excited to be here and give you an update on what we've been working on for the last year. So our performance measure, I think everybody's aware of it, but performance measure 1.08 is to achieve a reduction in the number of fatal and serious injury crashes to 0. And why are we here? Unfortunately, in the past 5 years, nearly 60 people have lost their lives on the streets of Tempe from motor vehicle crashes. An additional 400 people have been seriously injured. And so we, as a community, as a city, want to do better. A little background on Vision Zero, about what Vision Zero is. It's a traffic safety policy that takes an ethical approach towards achieving safety for all road users. So not only do we have a civil reason to do this, but we really have an ethical reason to move forward with this. And all road users, so that's bicyclists, pedestrians, scooter users, drivers, transit users. And so there's 3 key principles. The first is that traffic deaths and serious injuries are preventable. We can have a system where everybody lives and gets to where they need to go. Secondly, crashes will occur. We're not perfect, we're human beings. The driving task requires us to make decisions, and most crashes are, over 90% are a result of some kind of human error. So we know that we can't fully remove that, but what we can make sure is that when a crash does happen, it doesn't result in serious injury or death. And finally, safety is everybody's responsibility. Our drivers and our pedestrians and cyclists to a certain extent, but also myself as an engineer, making sure that we have a system in place that accommodates our users. And also I look to you as our elected officials and policymakers in making sure that decisions are made to promote safety on our streets. I'm really excited about this. This map has been updated since the last time I saw you, and City of Tempe has been confirmed as a Vision Zero city here in the United States and the first in Arizona, which I'm very excited about. What did all these cities do to become a Vision Zero city? The first is that they set a clear goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and severe injuries, and we did that with our performance measure 1.08 that I read earlier. Also, council officially committing to Vision Zero, and we did that last February with a vote from council, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. It's really important to have key city departments, but not only city departments and employees, but also community stakeholders, and making sure that everybody's engaged in the process. And finally, you need to have a plan. We know where we want to get to. We want to get to that 0, but we have to have a plan in place to understand exactly what the steps are to get there. So here's our timeline. We definitely have been busy over the last year. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but we started off in January. Staff did a presentation to the council on Vision Zero. Shortly thereafter, in February, the council adopted resolution number R2018.13, which approved moving forward with the Vision Zero framework. We convened city staff into a task force, and that task force met twice monthly and still continues to meet. And then in June, we planned a large stakeholder visioning workshop where we had over 50 different members of our community, city staff, ASU, school districts, residents, students. It was very exciting to get all that feedback. We listened, we learned, and then from that, we then met into smaller working groups, 3 working groups in August to identify goals and strategies, followed by 3 more meetings in October to refine those goals and strategies. Then in January of this year, we got everybody back together and prioritized those. All those great ideas, we had over 57, and we realized we need to be sure that this is something that we can, that's achievable and that we can complete. And so we kind of narrowed that down with that prioritizing workshop. Then in February and March, staff as well as a consultant that we had on board produced the draft action plan. We shared that with public meetings in March. We presented that to the Transportation Commission in April, and then here I am today presenting to Mayor and Council. So we've been busy. As we went through the action plan process, I mentioned earlier, we felt it was really important to engage city staff as well as community stakeholders. And I'm not going to read through all these, but it gives you a sense of just how much outreach and how much stakeholder activity played into the process. And I thank all of our partners that have been a process to this point. We wanted to make sure that we were using data, and so as part of that, we wanted to know where are these crashes happening. So we used the data that we had available from our police department, as well as using mapping from our GIS group, to really hone in and get an idea of kind of hot spots and where in the city we need to focus maybe a little bit more of our attention and limited resources. We worked with our GIS staff and created this really neat, interactive, robust website. And so this is available to everybody. And historically, a lot of times, we've just kept traffic data internally. And we felt it's really important for us to share this with our community, make them aware of what's happening, and so they can make safe choices. And so I'm going to click through a little bit. I don't have the live website here, but it is available on our Vision Zero website. But it's very interactive. So, for example, this is between 2012 and 2017, all the crashes that were high severity or fatal in the city of Tempe. And you can kind of see some trends just from looking at that the majority happen on our arterial street network. What you can also do is on the top left corner, you can see that you can click by violation. So was the event that led up to that, did it have to do with failing to yield right-of-way, speeding, a distraction, any of those different possibles? On the bottom left, it talks about crash types. So are they left turn crashes and angle crashes, which tend to be more severe, or were they rear ends or side swipes or something of that nature? On the top right, you can click and find out whether alcohol was involved, which we find that there usually is an overrepresentation when alcohol is involved in a crash. We can also look by year, driver, pedestrian, or bicyclist. And then also on the bottom right, you can find out more about what the age range. So I'm going to show you just a few examples. If I click on the two bars on the left, one is speed too fast for conditions, the other is exceeding a lawful speed, we see how the map has changed. So from that 550, we can now see where the crashes took place that involved speeding. And so we can kind of look and get an idea how that plays into that. Another, as I mentioned earlier, here's a kind of a closer look at that. Another is alcohol. And so we can see that these are where all the crashes, fatal and serious injury crashes in the city that had alcohol as a factor. And finally, oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. On the bottom right, I just selected some of our younger community, and we can get an idea. This is drivers 24 and under, where those types of crashes. And so not surprisingly, we see a fair amount around the university and that part of the city. But it's really a unique interactive tool to make decision-making process for us as the city, for our police department if they're doing enforcement and education activities, to be able to use our resources and our time most appropriately, but also for our community to go in there and just educate themselves on what's happening in the city. So it's really exciting. Like I said, this used to be something that we were aware of and had access to, but we think it's really important for our residents and visitors to be able to see. So using all that data, we came up with kind of some key action areas where we're going to focus our attention, those being intersections, bicycles and scooters, pedestrians, so that's some of our more vulnerable community, nighttime crashes, which are overrepresented, so we want to pay special attention to that. Nighttime crashes, impairment, we all know is a major factor when it comes to fatal and serious injury crashes. We looked at inexperienced drivers, and then we realized through the discussion process that on the other end of the spectrum, our very experienced roadway users also could benefit. So making sure that some of our older drivers are aware of any changes. Technology is changing a lot these days. There's new laws and things in place. We want to make sure that we're helping our younger drivers, but also not forgetting about our older drivers. Distraction, which I think we just presented on recently, and the state of Arizona just passed legislation, which we're very excited about, but we know that distraction plays a factor. And finally, there was a general area where there were really good strategies, but didn't fall into these other categories, but we still wanted to address those. I don't expect anybody to read these, and the print is too small, but I just wanted to show these are those areas broken down with specific strategies then that we're going to work towards to meet that goal. We had a public involvement process. Not only did we have our stakeholder meetings for the last year, but we also shared this action plan with the public. We had 2 meetings, one on a Wednesday, one on a Saturday. We also took public comment online. We advertised through social media, emails, press releases, paid ads, Tempe Today, and then we've had a lot of interest from the media, both ABC 15, Arizona Republic, and others with our process. The public feedback is generally supportive. What wasn't supportive kind of said maybe we weren't going far enough, and I think that there's value to that. They like the data component, and so you can see here, I'm not going to read through all these, but this was basically covers most of the feedback that we received at those public meetings and online. And we haven't just been waiting to have this plan done. We've been actively doing strategies and working towards our Vision Zero goal. So here's a number of those. On the general side, we're in the process of purchasing 2 mobile changeable message boards. So what you typically see in a construction site or letting you know about an event, we want to use those to provide education to our roadway users, as well as work with our police department on some of their enforcement and education campaigns. At intersections, we've been working through our CIP budget. We're going to begin construction this year on 2 roundabouts, those at Priest and Grove Parkway, as well as Ash and Rio Salado. We're also looking at our major intersections where we tend to have a higher number of crashes, those being Rural and Southern, Scottsdale and Rio Salado, and Rural and University. And so we're actively in the design process for those. Rural and Southern should start construction later this year. When we look at bicycles, we're in the process of doing our Tempe streetcar, and so what we did was we pulled in some of our bicycle experts in the community and had them review some of those designs. We know that where there's trackway, there's a potential for bicyclist tires to get in the trackway. Other communities have worked towards that, and so we thought it was really important to get our experts, our users, our riders in the community and have them take a look and give us feedback. So we got some really good feedback from them on that. Nighttime crashes, when we were going through this exercise, we realized in North Tempe along Scottsdale, we had kind of a high amount of bicycle pedestrian crashes happening at night. And so we jumped on that immediately and upgraded our street lighting to 4,000 Kelvin LED lighting, which has really helped make bicycles and pedestrians and all users in the area much more visible. And we have a long-term plan to, we're working on our residential streets, but to do that citywide, and that's in our CIP 5-year plan. For impairment, our police department has actively working and has received GOHS funding to proactively do DUI education enforcement as well as scooters. And finally, we presented about this and the council adopted a new city code for banning the use of electronic devices while driving. And so we haven't just been waiting, we've been actively working on this and are excited to continue. So our next steps, we look to get feedback from our mayor and council on this action plan. After incorporating any feedback that we get from you, we plan on bringing this to the May 22nd regular city council meeting. And if approved there, then the task really begins, and that's where we'll work with our lead agencies and implement the strategies that we've identified as getting done in the first year. And that concludes my presentation, and I open it up.
Great. Thanks, Julian. First, I want to thank you and the staff. You guys have done, it's very impressive what you have done regarding Vision Zero. The public involvement, as you stated, has been very comprehensive. You could see all the meetings that were on your screen, but also getting the public to really weigh in on it, I think is something important. And also the stakeholders that we've had, consistent stakeholders throughout the process, help us look at the data that you mentioned to develop the strategies. I really, speaking of data, all the interactive data, I want to thank our GIS team, the enterprise team for the work in making all the data that we can compile and put it in a format that is really understandable as well as interactive, as you pointed out. That's really something that's leading technology for us. I also, I see we have some strategies that relate to different targets that, for like example, distractions, pedestrians, etc. Is there a target that you see or that the committee sees having the most, that would have the most strategies for? Or an area that we need to prioritize?
We think that it has to, it can't just be piecemeal, and so we think that it has to be all the areas working together. So it has to be all these strategies. There has to be an education component, an enforcement component, an engineering component, emergency response. We believe that if just focusing on one won't get us there, and so that's why we really tried to make this comprehensive. And we plan on taking on all these strategies head on. Some will be easier than others, but we think that because of the stakeholder involvement and the different groups, that we can, instead of having to stop and focus on individual ones, that we really can take this on. So it's got to be, I think, all of them working together to get to that zero.
In the draft plan, I see the lead for the strategies is it the transportation department? Are you taking the lead on the different strategies? And then if you are, what tools do you need to help be successful? Because that's something that was brought up by a resident, but also, like, are we making sure that we have the capacity to implement some of the strategies that you're prioritizing for us? It could be, it could be what? Evaluating the intersection that are, the signal intersections and how they are frequently used at the intersections of the signals. Maybe evaluating the pedestrians' activity and how would that look, what resources or capacity are you able to take all that on?
So I think we're still in the process of looking at some of that. Some of the strategies we'll have to refine a little bit more to get down deeper into the weeds on that. But transportation is a lead on many of them, but not all of the strategies. We also have work that will take place with our neighborhood services, and some ASU, I think, has been identified on some of these. So some are very easy, and some will take more work. And so I think we'll know more as we go through this. This whole process has kind of been a learning experience, and so I definitely don't have answers to everything because we've kind of been learning as we've gone through the process. But that's something that I think after the plan has kind of been adopted, that we'll really sit down and then come up with the next solutions on how to move forward.
This is game changing. The fact that we're the only city in Arizona to adopt this. So thank you for that. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I want to compliment your meeting structure. The fact that you got through all of those meetings in such an efficient amount of time is really very impressive. So thanks to you and your staff for doing that. I also want to compliment you on that you had 2 public meetings, and that is something that I've really been striving to have the city do, just in case people work during the week and they can't get to the night meeting or Saturday meeting or whatever the case may be, and the 2 public meetings. So thank you for doing that, and also all your social media outreach and your emails. So a very, very impressive program, and my compliments to you. Thank you, Julian.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Thanks so much, Julian. An amazing result. Couldn't have hoped for something better. And many of you may know, I know Commissioner Guzzi knows, but one of our transportation commissioners, David King, he's also a transportation urban planner at ASU, was involved in a terrible bike crash in Phoenix last week, and he broke a rib and multiple fractures of his face, and it was a red light runner. And he has a long road to travel, but he's someone who's bringing us so much expertise and bringing his classes and dedicating them to some of our roadway issues. So I just want to, I know how much Vision Zero means to him, and he wanted me to convey his appreciation. And I know that, it's so sad to see Phoenix turn down Vision Zero, and I know that we're leading the way. And when I saw your report and the agenda last Friday, I sent it to my friend Kate Gallego. I know that she was very proud of what we were doing in Tempe and wanted to see it replicated in Phoenix. I sent her the process because I sent it to folks in the National League of Cities and Local Progress. And it's like, if anybody wants a template for how to do Vision Zero, we got it here. Just sub in your city name, and this is the way to go. So I hope that Phoenix's decision is not forever and a day, and they'll probably reconsider. You did such an amazing job. I just want to add my take on Vision Zero and things that we could be working on. Bus-only lanes, priority signaling, fully protected bike lanes and cycle tracks, narrowed car lanes, more frequent crosswalks, lowered speed limits, and additional street diets, and decreased headways for arterial buses so we can signalize and have the buses flow more smoothly. So just a few things that are my favorite little points. But thank you so much for all you've done. And thanks to the Transportation Commission for weighing in so substantively on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. Just all's been said. You guys did a great job. I mean, this is one of those things that really makes this city attractive. And I just noticed that with the cities that you presented not so long ago on this, each of those cities we're competing against those cities, so to speak. We're competing against jobs creation. We're competing against this city being an attractive community, and they all represent kind of that. You know, you look at things like the California coast cities and Austin and whatnot. They have a vibe, they have an attraction of what we're doing and being innovative. And we're innovative in so many ways. And I just want to say I appreciate that, because those are the cities that we're really kind of competing against. Not only just cities in Arizona, but really cities across the nation and the world. So thank you.
Anybody else? I want to wrap it up. I mean, this is game changing. This is great for our community. I'm so impressed. I mean, look at, we just went through the last item with agency review and all the different stakeholders. To see the amount of stakeholders from the Transportation Commission to the from the Tempe Bicycle Action Group, that speaks volumes, and the stakeholders to get the input, work that with our technology, with the GIS team. That really is remarkable to get great results. So we can't do it without all of the residents in our community and the different stakeholders. So thank you for that. This is a great step. Keep us posted, because I know we're going to be working between Lauren, myself, and other members of the council involved with National League of Cities and U.S. Conference of Mayors. We are a leading example when it comes to planning in our community. So thank you for that, especially when it comes to Vision Zero and our transportation plan. So thank you. All right. Next item, if we can, we're going to take a little recess before the next item on our agenda is the interviews of the council candidates. So we're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break. How about 10? Let's do 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. They will be sitting down there. All right, good evening. We're going to reconvene the council meeting. Next item on our agenda is the interview of our city council applicants. If our applicants, could you please come down to in front of us? So bear with us. This is the first time we're actually doing this, so this is a yeah, work in progress. So if you can sit down, and one of the things I want to do is we're each going to have 3 minutes to give an opening statement, and if you could, if it's okay with you, you could stand to give an opening statement at the podium. That's fine. And then we are going to ask you a series of questions. You're each going to have to answer the same question, and you have 2 minutes to respond to the questions, and then for the second round of questions, then you're going to have 2 minutes again, and then the closing statements, you guys can have your closing comment, you can have 3 minutes. So it's 3, 2, 3, if that makes sense. 3 minutes for opening, you have 2 minutes for the respond to the questions, and then after the questions, your final closing statement, you have up to 3 minutes. And we're gonna go ahead and start. So we have Councilmember Arredondo Savage is on the phone with us. Yes, Councilmember Keenan.
Sorry, Mayor. It says on our paper here they'll have 3 minutes to answer. I just want to clarify that that's going to be 2.
It's 2.
Okay, thank you.
You can have.
I'm happy it's 2. I just want to make sure that there's no. It says 3.
I do want to thank all 49 applicants that did apply to be considered for this position. It really speaks volumes of the commitment of our community. And as you've seen in the previous items before this item, this agenda item, the involvement we had with our agency review, the involvement we've had with our stakeholders in our Vision Zero. I just want to thank the residents for your passion and your willingness to serve, all 49 of you. So let's give them a round of applause if we can. And just so everyone knows in the audience that's watching at home, I did briefly explain the process, but I can explain it again. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to do an introductory remarks, and then the questions, they'll have 2 minutes to respond in each question, and then the final closing statement is up to 3 minutes. Also, on April 15th, the council did finalize the timeline to fill the vacant council seat for our city charter. We had 30 days from the 12th of April to fill that seat. The application period was from April 16th to April 22nd. So right now, we are going to go ahead and get started. The appointment that process to fill the vacancy will be voted on, and a swearing-in ceremony will take place at the next regular council meeting on May 9th. And the appointed member will serve the rest of the partial term until it expires in July of 2020. With that, I will go ahead and I already said, Councilmember Arredondo Savage, you're on the phone, correct?
Yes, Mayor, I'm here.
Okay. So if we could start, you guys could draw straws. Mr. Cassano, you're the closest person. Go ahead and start. And welcome.
Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and Council, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here before you to try to explain to you why John Cassano should be selected for this position. I just think I might give you some background. My wife and I, Bobby, I think she's still in the audience, moved here 45 years ago to open D&B Ace Hardware at Rural and Baseline. At that time, we were a new business. We were as far south in the community as you could go, but there was a sense I needed to get involved. So I joined a brand new Kiwanis club, Nuevo at that time, and I also joined the Chamber of Commerce, which I became very active in. During that period of time, I decided to run for the city council and was elected in '84 and served just about 10 years on the council. Since I'm leaving the council, I think I need to explain why I've been involved. I was appointed to the Transportation Commission and served over time 12 years on that commission, as well as being chairman twice. It was nice to hear what the Transportation Commission has been working on, and I worked on some of the Vision Zero task force issues at the time I was still on the commission. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? I know why you're redoing this now. Anyway, I currently serve on the city's Development Review Commission, and that's been exciting. I joined that commission in July of last year, and I'm enjoying those meetings and making a contribution as to what goes on in the city in the development side of things. During my terms on the Chamber of Commerce Board, I served as the chairman twice. I currently serve as the committee chairman for the Chamber's Government Relations and Transportation Committee. And I've enjoyed doing that because we brought a number of council members in to talk about what the city's going and city staff to keep us all apprised as to what's happening in the business community. I served on the Chamber for several years. I've been on the board of Friendship Village. I'm its current president. I've been on that board for almost 35 years. And find that to be an exciting thing and working with the much older generation. I like to say that, older generation. I was also on the Tempe Leadership Board, but in my one time before coming on the council, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce at that time, and that's when we started the discussions to start Tempe Leadership. It was started the next year. So I feel when somebody asks me, what class are you? I'm zero class. I'm no class. But I was involved at that time. There are some important things that I have identified, and one of those is the complexities within the city. The departments, the organization, the budgeting, as you discussed today, are very complex. And I've been through those issues before. There are some things that we're going to see in the next year, and those we've talked about some today, and that is maintaining neighborhoods is very important. It's the infill projects. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you got interrupted, so if you want to finish up what you have to say, that's fine.
Can you hear me on the mic? Just, okay, is that better? Okay, can I pick up where I?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. I understand these complexities of the city. I'm ready to hit the ground running. And some of those things we're going to be talking about is police and fire services meeting the new growth of the community, affordable housing, which was touched on, the increase in homelessness throughout the community, setting priorities based on needs, and encouraging small business development, along with addressing the new technologies. One coming fast is autonomous vehicles. So I'm experienced, I'm ready to hit the ground running. I have a proven track record of leadership and service, and I have no intention of running for a full term on the council. And I have an ability to encourage consensus for the good of the whole, and I would like your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casano. Next is Arlene Chin. Is that the version of dropping the mic? Or you got to be a little more. Way to go, Don. Ms. Chin.
Good evening. Mayor and Council, thank you for including me and inviting me here tonight. I've worked with several of you on community activities, boards, commissions, a lot of initiatives. And you may be more familiar with my working style. But what I'd like to do is introduce myself to the staff and community members who are here tonight and watching that may not have worked with me in the past. I grew up in Tempe. In fact, one of my early jobs was washing dishes and bussing tables at my parents' Chinese restaurant just down the street, about a mile from here. I went to school in South Tempe. My home is in central Tempe, and I work in downtown Tempe. I was a first-generation college student, and I'm a proud ASU graduate. My community involvement started in my teens. I was on the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission just a few years ago. I've remained involved. And my involvement has been with various Tempe-based organizations, several boards, several commissions, and other organizations that are rooted in Tempe. My professional experience have been in both the public and private sector. I've worked for large organizations and small businesses. I've worked on complex, multi-layered initiatives that involved numerous stakeholder groups. I am very familiar with budgeting, strategic planning, and forecasting. I approach decision-making as a consensus builder. That's my attitude. I think it's very important to have healthy, respectful discourse during the discussions. I think it's critical to have all stakeholders involved in those early decisions. In this role on council, that means working closely with the community, with city staff, and of course, mayor and council to move Tempe forward. I would welcome those challenges and responsibilities, and I ask for your support in this appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Shireen Lerner. Welcome.
Thank you. Age. So, mayors and members of the council, thank you very much for the opportunity to interview with you. And I'm honored to be here. I'm also grateful to have been selected with Arlene, who I worked with on the Tempe Community Council, and with Don, who I worked with on the Transportation Commission. So we've all known each other well, and I admire both of them. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you. So I too have lived in Tempe a very long time, for more than 40 years. I came here to go to Arizona State University, received my degree in archaeology, and never left. I got married, I raised a family, and I've lived here ever since. My children went to Marcos de Niza High School and went to ASU as well. So you have my resume and application, which lists where I have served and volunteered, and I don't want to repeat all of those here. So I'd rather just talk to you a little bit about why I have chosen to serve more than all the places that I've done. So when I look at my years of service, I see two phases in my life. The first phase relates to my field of study, archaeology and anthropology, and my family. I am a first-generation American. Both of my parents were immigrants, and as such, I have a really strong interest in cultural heritage and connecting the past to the present. In my teaching, I help students understand the relevance of the past to their lives today. My early years of service focused on this, emphasizing historic preservation, archaeology, particularly through education, and serving in organizations like the Arizona Preservation Foundation, the Arizona Archaeological Council, and the Tempe Historic Preservation Commission. In later years, I shifted my focus, primarily as a result of being a teacher of students who have challenges that they strive to overcome to achieve success. I teach students who struggle as a result of homelessness, addiction, mental illness, and poverty. My interactions with these students drove me to want to spend more time to work to improve the lives of those who have such needs. And that's how I got involved with Tempe Community Council and the Tempe Community Action Agency. I want to help people like that to give them a chance to be successful. So that kind of gives a little background on sort of those areas of my involvement. Since then, I've also just gotten involved in commissions because I guess I don't know what else to do with my time. So that's where I've served on the Transportation Commission and Parks and Recreation. Tempe leadership has been a big part of my life for the past 5 years. And also recently on Tempe Census 2020, which I find really important because as we know that we need to receive the accurate amount of funding so that we can actually serve our citizens. So I think that's a really important one that we get right, the census. The bottom line is, for me, I just love Tempe. It has a small town atmosphere and flavor in a big metropolitan area. We know each other. I mean, we're just sitting around here and we all know each other, and we probably know most of the people in this room. You can get involved. There's always something you can do. Can I take 30 seconds more? Okay. Just I want to say that I love the fact that we build on our community values. I love the way we interact with each other, that we want to make Tempe a better place to live. We want to look to the future. And it's a great place for us to all grow up, raise families, and grow old. Tempe's all about making connections with people in our community, and I'd love to be involved at the City Council to help continue that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to ask the first question, and then Vice Mayor Kuby will ask the second one, and then Councilman Navarro, then Councilmember Keating, Councilmember Adams, and then Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Okay, first question I have. What?
Public safety.
Yep. I got you. First question I have, and if the first one, if you could respond, Don, Arlene, and then Shireen, and then we're going to mix it up with the second one.
From here,
It's up to you. If you could sit, you could stand, whatever you feel is comfortable. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. What do you believe is the greatest challenge facing Tempe residents at this time?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint one, but if you take a look around here, you see an awful lot of construction going on. And that's one of the most important things we need to do, is to be able to manage this tremendous growth that's happening in our city without putting an undue burden on our neighborhoods that might end up very close to some of these infill projects. We don't have new land. We can't go out and annex new land. So we have to make do with what we have. So I think that that's one of the things. It's maintaining those neighborhoods and getting the infill projects to work well within their confines.
Thank you. Arlene?
I think one of our greatest challenges is keeping up with our success. I think we in our community have been very successful, and with that, with growth comes change and dealing with that. So Don mentioned, and in our community priorities, we talk about neighborhoods. Our residents find neighborhoods important to continue to preserve that, traffic, but it's maintaining growth, but also going back to what's important and then maintaining our quality of life. So challenges are great because they often are the result of success. So I don't think they're impossible tasks, but I think there's a way to revisit and maintain our success in a sound manner.
Thank you. Shireen?
So I will agree with the two others on the fact that there's probably no one challenge. I think for us, we have to just look at what are we trying to do with Tempe and how do we want our future to look. And that's part of our challenge, is thinking ahead. We just spent part of today listening to human services and the needs that we have for human services. And I would say that's one of our greatest challenges that we have in Tempe, is how are we going to address those people in need so that we can actually continue to have the community that we all know and love. As part of that, I will also say that making our neighborhoods both feel safe and making people feel connected is another challenge that we have. We want to continue to interact and communicate with everybody in our neighborhoods and make sure that they know what's going on and that they also have a voice in what's going on. And then the third part is being somebody who actually took an extra 10 minutes to get up here from my house because of traffic. I will say transportation issues and traffic is probably a third major need that we have to deal with, because it is only going to get more intense. Tempe, to some extent, is a pass-through city with a lot of people heading to Mesa and Chandler and other areas, and so the traffic just grows all the time.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Kuby.
So this question relates to the unique perspective you might bring to our council. What voices in the community that may be underrepresented on council currently would you represent, and why?
And we're going to start with Arlene.
Well, the first answer is you've never had a Corona del Sol graduate on council. I think I'm a fairly typical Tempean, and I've grown up and I've seen so many changes in the growth and development of our city and our community. I understand the culture of the community. Let's not pretend that the most visible is I'm an Asian American, and you've never had that an Asian American represented on council. That's not to say that I haven't felt represented. You've all done a great job in representing my voice. But I also know that for our community, and the population has grown, and what that means to our young people, for someone like me with my background to step forward and offer to serve. I think that's important. But really, it's as a Tempean that has seen growth, change, and understanding the values, long-term values and long-time values of the community.
So I think what I can bring is a perspective as an educator, a teacher, that I am interacting with a wide range of people of different ages, from different backgrounds, and different communities. So I think that's one of the strengths I can bring, is that perspective. I also will say that having gone through Tempe leadership, it has given me an opportunity to meet people from all parts of Tempe who have participated. And that has opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that Tempe is going through and a lot of the different people that are there, because the people who go through Tempe leadership are a heterogeneous group. They're not all the same. And so by having gone through that, I feel I've had the opportunity to meet people from all different neighborhoods, all different walks of life, businesses, different aspects of the community, different involvement in the community. So I think being a teacher is something that I can bring, being somebody who's been very neighborhood focused, and then my involvement with Tempe leadership.
Well, as a long-time resident of Tempe, I've watched this community grow. The reason that we moved to this community was it had a certain feel of it. We looked all around, we came here, and the minute we drove into Tempe, we said, wow, there's something different about this. And that's in 1973. We decided that we were going to set roots here, build a business here, and get involved in the community. And my first involvement really in the community was with Kiwanis and dealing with providing for children. That was the function of the Kiwanis Club we chose to go with. But now things have changed. We've got an affordable housing crisis for all generations, not just the young and the middle class, but seniors as well. I hear from a number of people that are seniors now saying, I'm getting squeezed out of my home, or I'm getting squeezed out of my apartment because I can't afford a $2,000 a month rent. Those are things that we need to make sure we continue to represent. Those are the people that really are underrepresented, because they don't really think they have a voice, and they don't think that they have anywhere to go. But you heard it in agency review meeting tonight. That's one of the areas. You've got a tremendous amount of homeless folks that are all over the city now. It's not just one place. So those are the areas that I would like to work to concentrate on in the year that I have, because there's a lot of other things here which we will be taking care of on the council and as a matter of course. But those things we need to continue to focus on.
Next is Councilman Navarro, and we're going to start with the question with Shireen, Don, and then Arlene.
I almost want to do a two-part. Obviously, I think you all are very known in the city of Tempe, and you've been involved. So with that being said, with issues that come up with residents and council, and they're sometimes heated, how do you gather consensus? And then give me an example of how you've done that in your professional career or wherever you want to apply it.
Well, maybe I'll just start with the example, and that might help in terms of explaining how I go about it. So I'm going to go back in time to when Maple Ash came to the city and said we would like to be a historic preservation National Register district. As we all know, Maple Ash is made up of people who live there and own property and people who buy property and rent. And now there's more with people infilling and buying, building new properties. So it's changed a lot. At the time, Harry Mitchell was mayor. He asked me, because of my historic preservation background, to lead a task force to develop a historic preservation ordinance for the city, because we didn't have one at that time. So we gathered together and sat at the table, and I had people who stood up and yelled in my face. They called me names. They wrote articles, letters, explaining why they did not want to have this happen in the city. I did my best to basically navigate and facilitate and make sure everybody had a voice at the table. And the people at the table were people who were homeowners, as well as people who rented. And so that was their business to basically have rentals. And I actually had one of those rentals when I was going to school. Ultimately, we basically kept working, and we found that we did have some commonalities, but it took a lot of work and a lot of connections that we were making. And literally, we broke bread. One of the people who was most upset about what was happening ultimately said, come over for dinner, and let's actually try to work this out when we're just having a friendly conversation. We spent several hours together talking through these things without the heat of everybody else around. We came back to the table, and we both were able to say, here's some common ground that we found. That's a part of what I try to do, is I try to reach out, we try to facilitate, and we try to find some common ground, and we can work up from there.
Well, I'm going to go back a bit in time about the issue, and I think the issue we worked on. When we decided as a city council to widen Rural Road, you thought that the world had come to an end. In fact, the newspaper came out and said, you're writing rural, you're writing McClintock, we're going to call it McRural, because we were taking some right-of-way from residents. The biggest concern there was cut-through traffic. We had neighbors that were on the west side of rural, just north of the Superstition, who were going to be impacted probably the most on the cut-through traffic. And I sat down with them first to listen to what their concerns were. And over time, we worked out a way with managing that traffic. And even to this day, you drive down Rural Road and you will see there are no turn signs at certain times of the day into that same neighborhood. That neighborhood has continued to prosper. It's one of the older ones we have in that part of town. But I can go back also to my last 8 years. I worked at the Arizona Department of Transportation. I was the ombudsman for the governor and the legislature's constituents dealing with their issues around the state. It was a job of consensus, 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 and trying to solve their problems with bureaucrats, engineers, and the public. So I've got this track record, and I've been doing this pretty much most of my working life, is building consensus and getting things done in the community.
Councilman Navarro, your question was, how do we find consensus in those types of situations? I look for common ground. When you have heated debate and you have many stakeholders who are concerned and want to weigh in on the issues, that means they care. And what you need to do is help find common ground and start there. And I'll give you 2 examples in my professional role. And they both dealt with or deal with limited resources, the allocation of limited resources. One, I was on the TCC board and I chaired the enhancement committee, which oversees agency review. So I know firsthand how challenging that is. We never run short of need, but we have limited resources. You saw that tonight and you discussed that tonight. And as reviewers, you wanted to fund everything. Every cause was worthy because they were intended to help people. And sometimes it got heated. But we always went back and found common ground. What are the priorities? What do we need to do as a community first? In one of my other roles, I worked with scholarships, working with students, counselors, teachers, parents. Every student is worthy. And again, I had to allocate limited resources. And you have to find common ground, and you have to be reasonable, and you have to respectfully be truthful with the situation, and you have to prioritize.
Thanks. All right. Next question is going to be from Councilmember Keating, and then it's going to start with Don, then Arlene, and then Shireen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, applicants. I do appreciate you being here and answering our questions. I asked each of you this individually, and I gave you a heads up. I was going to ask you publicly. You are seeking to replace former Councilmember Granville, who was on the record of saying that he was not going to run in 2020. As a result, we have several great candidates who've already thrown their hat in the ring. I know I'm very concerned with the image of maybe the council having its thumb on the electoral scales going into the 2020 election. So my question to you is, will you commit to me, this council, and the people of Tempe that if you are selected to fulfill the remainder of former Councilmember Granville's term, that you will not seek re-election to that seat in the year 2020? Thank you.
Councilmember Keating, Mayor, and the rest of the council. I can unequivocally tell you I will not seek re-election to the city council after the one-year time period. I mentioned that in my opening statements, and it is something that I've agreed to do. And it's not because not because I feel like I'm committed to doing it. It's because I want to do it that way. I agree with you. People that put themselves on the line to run for council need to have the opportunity to run for council. They don't need to run against someone who's had the advantage of 1 year name recognition. And so I commit to that wholeheartedly.
Councilmember Keating, absolutely. This is an easy question. I commit to that. I do not plan to run in 2020 at the expiration of this term.
I will also say that I do not intend to run in 2020.
All right. The next question is going to be from Councilmember Adams, and then you're going to start with Arlene, Shireen, then Don.
I've had many residents be concerned about whomever we select having an advantage on running for council in the future. Do you have any plans to ever run for council, or is it something that's not in your plans at all? I know that Councilmember Keating asked about 2020, but I guess I would like to extend that maybe another 10 years or something. Okay, maybe 6. I'd just like to know kind of your plans.
I currently have no plans to run.
I currently and in the future have no plans to run. I can guarantee you that. Thank you.
I again will repeat that as well. I currently have no plans to run.
All right. Thank you. Next, we're going to have Councilmember Arredondo Savage ask the next question, and we'll start with Shireen, Don, and then Arlene.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Hey, you guys, so sorry I can't be there with you today. I thought I was going to be the last person asking a question, but I guess this is going to continue to go. So I thought I'd kind of keep it a little light and ask each of you, where are some of your favorite places to spend time in our great city?
Okay, I think this is me. I live in an area where I actually enjoy a lot of these places. Changing Hands Bookstore. It's one of my favorite places. I really did enjoy Max before it closed. I like Wildflower. I also loved Flanny's before that closed. I'm just worried about these closures. But I also love to come to downtown Tempe. It's one of my favorite things to do when we get a chance. I go to, I have season tickets to Gamage, so we'll often go to Pedal House or some of the places downtown. I'm kind of naming places, which probably isn't a good idea. But and I could probably name some others, but I really try to find new places in Tempe also. So when a place has opened, I try to go there and frequent the business. There's a new place, Sweetest Season, which is down at at McClintock and Guadalupe. It's a great place that just opened. It opened in November, I guess. So I try to find new places that have gone and experiment and go to different places in Tempe. So there's no single place, but those are some of the areas I really enjoy. And I enjoy the fact that we have the ability to go to the theater as well, and the arts. I like to go to hear music. I like to go to Tempe Center for the Arts and hear some music any music basically that's going on. I'll go to a lot of those concerts.
Thank you very much. Well, Councilmember Arredondo Savage, I can run down a list. First ones I'll mention really, having been a small business owner, I frequent the locally owned businesses. As the mayor will attest, I do hang out at Steve's Coffee in the mornings. I was at lunch at Sweetest Seasons because I know Melody and Todd, the owners, and they are putting in tremendous hours, but they're putting a great product out there, and we need to support those. I too used to go to Mac's. I tried Phillies. They replaced Flanny's because I try to do local things. But I like walking the canals that we've spent so much time putting in place with the canal pass, changing hands. In fact, I was just there the other day, spending my dollars there, not online. So, you know, there's a lot of great things going here. We've had season tickets to Gamage now since 1978, 79, and we would never give those up. That's our place. In place of sporting events, that's what we do. We like to go to those kinds of performances. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I love this question. I get to talk about food. Chow's Kitchen. You're going to find me at Chow's Kitchen probably once a week. I'm at Mark's Cafe or Sweetest Season, Sunburrows, and DeYoung's Boba place. That's my new favorite boba place. It's on Mill and Southern. I have a dog who likes to smile at people, so I have to take him to Tempe Town Lake quite often and walk him. And absolutely Sun Devil Stadium.
Great. All right. I have another question. So we're actually, Vice Mayor Kuby, you're going to ask the next round of questions, and then we're going to start with Don, Arlene, and then Shireen.
Okay.
You still have 2 minutes.
So affordable and workforce housing, as you've mentioned tonight, are a top concern for our residents, our community, and the highest stated priority of this council. The state of Arizona has made it illegal for cities to require developers to build or even to replace affordable and workforce housing. So how can Tempe increase its stock of dense, walkable, transit-oriented, mixed-use housing across all income and rent levels? That's a tough one, but let's just throw it out there.
It's real simple in 2 minutes. That's easy to answer. Well, I can tell you, as I mentioned earlier, affordable housing is extremely important. It's also maintaining neighborhoods where people can actually afford to live. And we need to continue to work within the framework that the state gives us, which is often very constrictive and confining. And everything we want to do, we have to think, what will they do to us if we do it? So it's a balance. But I think it's encouraging any new development that comes in with housing to provide a certain amount of housing, not just money to the city in the terms of a few $1,000s or whatever, but actually real housing. We've got some major developers in this community that building major apartment complexes, residential areas, and that's where we need to go. Get them to make the contribution. You don't have to strong arm them, but it would be really nice to encourage that as we encourage money for the arts. It's something we need to do, but that should avoid it if it's done by the developer rather than by the city.
Thank you for that question. Vice Mayor Kuby. Absolutely. You've identified a very important topic for our community. And affordable housing is not just an issue for those who cannot afford housing. It's a concern for all of us, for the equity in housing. I think one idea may be to work with private and community partners, much like the thought I have is, much like we ask builders of a certain square footage for an investment in art. And this may be an opportunity to ask private and community partners to do the same.
Thank you. Affordable housing is one of the biggest issues that we have in Tempe, actually. It affects our neighborhoods. It affects the people who live here, people who want to come and move here. So I think public-private partnerships are really important. I also I worked down for a while when I was at Arizona State Parks. I had to go to the legislature and try to get some things changed and done. I don't think it hurts if we can work with other cities and communities to see if we can actually make some changes at the legislature as well. To basically say why this law that they have that basically forbids us to do that, how it's impacting our communities. Because it's not just Tempe that affordable housing is a problem, but it's actually all of our communities. Many of our communities in the surrounding areas are also having the same problem of finding good housing for people who can't afford it. So if we can come together with other city councils, with the chambers of commerce, and actually go to the legislature, maybe we can make some tweaks in that legislation that's there, possibly propose some changes that could be a balance between the rights of private developers as well as the needs of the public. So that would be one thing I would suggest. And then I think we just have to, we've already heard the public-private partnership that both Don and Arlene mentioned. And I think we have to look at our urban core and areas where we are having high numbers of people who are finding that they cannot find the housing they need in the area that they need. We have to see if we can make sure that our transportation systems are connected to those areas where we do have housing that might be available for people. So linking all of those things together, development, transportation, and affordable housing would be really important.
All right, next is going to be Councilman Navarro, and we're going to start with Arlene, Shireen, then Don.
I was already on. So coming up next year, obviously we're going to have budget concerns that are going to come up. And with our growing city, with a lot of issues out there, and we're going around a bunch of them, and you probably heard throughout, the past year. What do you think are your 3 highest concerns with the city, and why? The 3 biggest concerns you feel that we're going to have to tackle next year, and why?
I would go to the community, and I look to the community for the answer in this. It's not a singular Arlene's issues, because that's not how I would come in. I represent the community. I work with the community. And what I'm hearing or reading about are neighborhoods, city streets, and safety concerns. And that may be, in some cases, lighting city streets, on the neighborhood streets. It may be looking at our parks, looking at how our neighborhoods are working with the communities and the associations, and working with our police force and looking at safety. So I would say neighborhoods, but what does that mean? In the community survey, we asked, and that became a top priority for our residents, but what does that mean? I asked 5 of my neighbors what their concerns were, and I got 5 different answers. And it involved the alleyways, it involved the street lights. So I think those concerns, but the larger bucket are neighborhoods. I think city streets. I know that we have maintained larger arterial streets, but I think it's time to look at our city streets and neighborhood streets and see what we can do. Along with the safety, we need to look at what deeper dive into in what areas of the community responded that way, and dig deeper into what their concerns are specifically.
Thank you. I also looked at the Tempe Community Survey from 2017 to kind of get a feel for what the community had responded to. And I think those are the issues that you've been addressing now. Some of them were addressed today at our meeting. Public safety, I think, is something that we really have to look at and see what's working, how we can improve that, how we can improve trust in the community, build more trust in the community, and work together as a community. That would be one area I would say. Another is social and human services, and one thing we haven't really mentioned, but education as a part of that, a component of that, because You have the pre-program, and I think you're going to have to be making some decisions on that fairly soon on whether or not to continue to fund it or whether to send it to the voters to decide whether there's a funding source. So I think that's going to come up, as far as I understand, in the next year or so of what to do with that program. And then I'll also go to neighborhoods, because neighborhoods are affected by everything. They are affected by economic development that might be in the area, transportation and traffic, the idea of safety. All of those things, the parks, all of those things go around neighborhoods. So I guess I would look at those three areas as the main areas, and knowing that some of those have funding issues that are coming up very quickly.
I'll list my 3 issues, but not necessarily in the order ranking them. Well, the first one is the neighborhoods, and I've mentioned that earlier. You know, we have a lot of impacts on our neighborhoods, and it doesn't matter whether you're in North Tempe, South Tempe, or Central Tempe. We all face very similar things, and there are worries and concerns that those things will impact. And if you go to South Tempe, where the larger homes might be located, you've got party houses, you've got Airbnb, you've got those issues, and the state's not helping us there in any way. If you go to the middle of Tempe, again, it's traffic congestion. It is infrastructure maintenance. It's the streets, as was said earlier. You know, we do the arterials, but what about my own street? There's potholes everywhere. Well, that's setting those priorities, and that's the needs analysis that has to be done and developing it in the future. But remember, we've got a lot of growth here, but along with that growth comes a lot of not good things and a lot of other problems. And some of the not good things is called crime. And we need to make sure that we have the police force up to speed. In addition to that, we need to look at how we provide the fire services and the emergency services. You know, these buildings are not single-story buildings, and when you get to the ground floor, you still got to get up to the top. And if there's some kind of an emergency, that takes time, and responding to that is much more difficult. So I think that you're talking about neighborhoods, infrastructure, and public safety. Those are my 3.
Next is Councilmember Keating, and then we're going to start with Shireen, then Don, then Arlene.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, applicants. So I'm going to caveat this by saying, outside of affordable housing, because I'm sure that's what you're all going to answer, and I want to find some points of differentiation between you, but it's certainly a very valid answer and a very valid concern within the city. But outside of affordable housing, if you could accomplish one thing in your 14 months on council, or be laser focused on one particular priority in your 14 months on the city council, what would that be and why?
Thank you for the very easy question that you just asked. So I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of what could be done, and I know that there's an initiative on seniors that's undergoing. I guess I'm going to have a hard time with one, because I guess I'm going to say I have 2 on both ends of the spectrum. One is to take a close look at what's happening with the preschool, and see whether or not what might happen in terms of funding, future funding, and whether or not that should be sent to the voters to make some decision on whether or not they're funding. And then the other side is, what are we doing to help our seniors not feel so isolated? We know that many of them are no longer going to some of our senior centers. So what are some alternative programs that we could do that could actually help better connect them to the community? Neighbors Helping Neighbors is now going within Tempe Community Action Agency, so that will help. But there's a lot of other things we maybe could do, and I'd like to have us take a look at, and I know that there's an initiative underway, but I'd like to take a close look at what are some programming that we could maybe do. Things like, you know, there's things called pop-ups in the parks that you can do with youth and children that bring people together in a neighborhood. Maybe we can do something like that with our seniors, maybe bringing them together outside of the senior centers where they can walk over to a park and meet other people who are in the community who are walking distance to them, instead of them feeling sort of somewhat isolated in their homes. Seniors continuing to live in place in their homes is important, and it's important for their health, it's important for their sense of community, and to give them grounding. So find a way to let them stay in their homes, but also give them support. I think that would be something I would take a look at.
Well, This is not easy because you say one thing and it goes against the other that you also have made a priority. But I would say right now, something that we can do in the next year is infrastructure improvements. That's not just streets. That's sewer lines, water lines, electrical lines, everything that runs the city. Everything the city has to have in place to make this comfortable and a place people want to live. We have, because of budget downturns during the housing crisis, we faced some tough decisions. I think in talking with the public works folks and so on, there is a way to work your way out of that, but it's going to take probably 5 to 6 years. But again, it goes back to setting those priorities. And I think you people have already been working on that because you have a process in place that takes a look at those. It's performance-based. And then you try to allocate your limited funds. But I think if we can get the infrastructure under control in the next year and make sure that the population understands that we're working on that, we know their concerns, and that we're going to get to it, I think that'll go a long way in the next year.
Councilmember Keating. First, let me preface my answer with this. 14 months is not a very long time. And I find it difficult to come in with a list or an agenda of my own choosing to pick one issue to work on. I think you have established, you've done a good job of establishing the priorities, and there would be a lot of work to do together. I could name one for you, so as to not avoid your question. And I'm going to say traffic. But that then spiders out into many different things. Density, which means growth and new development. But that also means Vision Zero. The presentation tonight was fantastic. I'm really excited about what that can do. So as I give you the topic that concerns me the most right now, because I travel in it every day, I also know that we have a full agenda of items that you've already established.
Sorry, the next question is going to be from Councilmember Adams. We're going to start with Don, then Arlene, and then Shireen. And then following Councilmember Adams will be Councilmember Arredondo Savage, and then myself.
First of all, thanks for going through this process. You are all making this a difficult decision. Neighborhoods are very important to me, and neighborhoods being included in the decision-making process is a high priority. What would be your plan to preserve our neighborhoods and encourage more residents to voice their concerns in the development decisions?
Councilmember Adams, that's a good question. It's also a difficult question. But as I mentioned earlier, neighborhoods and the maintaining their integrity is important. If you don't have strong neighborhoods, you don't have schools. If you don't have schools, you don't have strong neighborhoods. They go hand in hand. But also, if you don't have services near those neighborhoods, why would you want to live there? You know, so it's a matter of trying to provide a number of different things throughout the community that it goes back to, I think, what we talked about before. I did in transportation, 20-minute walkable city. Where can we get to without having to drive a long distance? It addresses the traffic issue to some extent. But again, you know, it's important to provide those services close by so that people want to stay in those neighborhoods, and that's what keeps them vibrant. If people start moving out, what moves in? Rentals. What comes with rentals? Other issues. I'm not saying renters aren't bad. I've been a renter. We've all gone through that. But I think that those things all go hand in hand, and we need to look at how we can encourage those kinds of things to exist around our neighborhoods. And that, I think, will then get those neighborhoods much more engaged. Then we can go into those neighborhoods and say, what do you need? We're working on this. What do you want? And I think that that's the way to approach this whole.
Councilmember Adams, thank you for that question. I think your question, if I may rephrase, is how do we involve more neighborhoods or residents involved in the decision making
That's correct.
Okay. Communication. I think we do a great job in our community of inviting citizen input. We always have public meetings, we invite the public, and we publish it online in water bills, and we invite our neighbors to come and to come. We want to hear them. You all have coffees in the neighborhood, and you invite discussion. You've always been available. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the "we can see them whenever we want" line back from Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. So we have the systems in place for input by our community members. But in this current age of so much communication and how busy people are, sometimes that gets lost. So we need to do perhaps take a deeper dive into looking at how we are communicating with people. What other ways can we meet neighbors where they are? And I don't mean just the literal go to their neighborhood, but where else are they? Where are they getting their information, and how do we put that information in front of them to invite them to participate? In the community survey, 47% of residents 93 said we had great interaction and customer service. I noticed that 47% indicated that they wanted to get more involved but didn't know how to be involved in the decision making. So for me, that would be a sign of what else do we need to do? Let's look at what we're doing and improve it.
So I agree that there's an awful lot of communication that comes out from the city to the neighborhoods. And it seems like, but the key is you have to actually, as a person who receives that, you have to actually read it. So when I get my bill, sometimes I just don't open that. And then somebody says, did you go to the park? They just had this great program. And I said, how did you know about it? Well, it was in the bill. So how do we change that? We have Nextdoor, we have online communication now that we're doing more of, and we can see that a lot goes out that way. I know that there are flyers that sometimes go out. I think that the city does a really good job of trying to get the word out. But what we need to do is have neighborhoods get more connected internally so that when something like that is happening, neighbors are helping neighbors. So it's going across neighborhoods or through neighborhoods, not just from the city to the neighbors. So I think we need to work on that, as well as we just had we're doing these arts and music in the parks now, which are great and a lot of fun. People are going out there. The one at Scudder Park had like 500 people. It was crazy how many people showed up at that. But that's another way to bring people together and use those. When we have those events, take advantage of the fact that we have the neighbors together. So on the one hand, you're having them there to socialize, but on the other hand, it's a great way to say, come on over and let's talk about some of the issues in your neighborhood. So whenever we have neighborhood gatherings, when we have openings of parks, when a lot of people come in, when we have issues that are going on and we have neighborhood meetings, like when there was a neighborhood meeting at Marcos Denisa about the orbit that was going to go through. And a lot of people came to those meetings. So that's a great time to say, tell us what else is going on as part of it. Now that we are gathered together, we're going to talk about the orbit, but we want your input on some other things. So anytime that we can gather people together and get the input, I think is what we want to do. And if we can help neighborhoods do their own connecting, I think that will be beneficial.
Great. All right, next question is going to be from Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Then we're going to start with Arlene, Shireen, then Don. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say one of the things I'd like to know is, well, I think one of the things I do know is we have really incredible employees in the city of Tempe, and we have a great Tempe family here. I would like to ask each and every one of you, how do you see yourself working with our employees to achieve your goals as a council member?
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I think the role of mayor and council serves as a servant leader to two distinct populations, the community, and you can slice thinly what that means in the community. But the other group where you serve as a servant leader is to the city staff. And you serve as and I speak to the current mayor and council, you serve to facilitate the interaction. It's a three-legged stool. We can't do this without mayor and council, the leadership and setting of priorities by you, and we cannot implement without city staff. We also, any priorities that you've set, you've incorporated community feedback. That's been very important, and you've made that a priority. So I think city staff, we do have a fantastic staff. They help to implement. And I think that's where I would work with both community, city staff, and of course, mayor and council to move forward any initiatives. But staff is key, the three-legged stool.
Thank you for that question. So we all have other jobs. Most of us have other jobs or have had other jobs at some time, and we all know how important staff is to our work. What we need to do is respect the staff, respect their knowledge, respect what they do. To me, that's number one, because very often they're the experts. So we have an idea, and we need to go to staff and say, what do you think? Because you're actually working on this all the time. So that's one area. I think we need to collaborate with staff. We need to know that they're burdened. They have a lot to do. And so what we don't want to do is hand them another project on top of everything else that they're doing. We have to respect their time. So one thing I know that when I work with my staff at Mesa, I don't hand them any new projects without first saying to them, what are you working on? How are things going? What's your priorities right now? And then certainly, to me, working with the council. What are the council priorities? What is the council asking staff to do? And what are the needs of the community? And combining all of that without, we can't just keep adding things on to our staff. We have to respect what they're able to do and able to accomplish. From my perspective, coming into the council, if I was honored enough to get that position, I'm going to be coming in and needing to ask questions, but I'm also going to have to respect their time and say, I can't be a burden on you. I have to do my own homework. I have to do my own research because you have a lot to do on your own. So I would see it as a collaboration, both with my peers as well as with the community.
You know, respect for the people that work day in and day out in the public sector sometimes is not given very easily. But this is an incredibly difficult job because you're trying to balance your work, the policies the council has set, the community priorities, and you have to also work within a framework that has been established to accomplish these things. The council sets the policy. The council determines where they'd like to see the money go. The staff is the ones that have to carry that out. But I learned a long time ago, you need to go through certain channels. You can't all, as individuals, go running to different staff members asking them to do different things. It confuses everybody. You run it through the manager's office, to the department heads, and then they will see where it fits within their workload, and that's very important. We can't get anything done unless the staff is willing to work with us, and they can't get anything done unless we're willing to work with them. So it's a two-way street. But I can tell you some of my best friends after leaving the council are former staff members at the city. You develop a bond, you develop a working relationship, you develop a high level of trust in what they have to say. And that's what gets you through this business, is the trust of what the staff is telling you is the best information they have available to you. So that's where I go on this whole thing.
Great, thank you. All right, my question, we'll start with Shireen, Dawn, and then Arlene. My question is, we talk a lot about our great programs, and I appreciate everything you guys, your answers that you guys have had. Everything from quality life amenities to infrastructure needs to affordable housing to just quality life improvement. That doesn't happen by itself. So my question to you is, if selected, what steps would you take to help put our city on a firmer financial footing? Because we can't do everything that we've been talking about unless we have the resources. I mean, that's the bottom line. Without resources, that are sustainable, not just one-time resources. So if selected, what would you do to help us to be, if selected, to be on a stronger financial footing, if you will, based on the knowledge that you have? Because we talk a lot of very great things. We have so many dollars to fund so many things that we all mean to us, and it's a balance. And you saw that a little bit tonight, and you saw it at our CIP before. And you guys have all dealt with budgets. So what would you do if selected? How would you help put the city in a firmer financial position that's sustainable?
Again, I'll thank you for that really easy question. No, thank you, Mayor. Fiscal responsibility is key. We have to be aware of the limits that we have in terms of our budget. I'm very conscious of that. We also have to look at our priorities. We recognize that not everything can get funded to the extent that we might want to. So I think we have to look at alternatives. We have to look at public-private partnerships. I think that's important. We have to go to our public as well. So I know that that's part of, I think, the next steps from my understanding about the pre-program, that might end up being something, because it was, I think, a 1 or 2 year funded program. So that the next step is to see what the residents of Tempe want to do from there. So that would be something. Do they have, and is there initiative that will be going out to them? That's a question that will be raised. I think we always have to take a close look at our budget. We have to see where we are spending, what the needs are, and then what the priorities are for our citizens. And to me, the key is just to make sure that we are keeping track of what our priorities are and whether our funding is going to our priorities. The more we can do to work with our private partners to bring things to the community that are high priorities for us, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So I think if I were to look at ways, I guess I would be reaching out to many of our private companies, especially some of the larger ones that have moved here, and say, what are some priorities for you for the city of Tempe, and how can we work together to...
Well, Shireen touched on 3 key points here: fiscal responsibility, priority setting, public-private partnerships. I've seen public-private partnerships in action at the state, and it does work. And it does get you more for your dollar, because you have the private sector making the investment, and you will pay it off over time as we would do bonding any project. But it also brings other benefits. What they will be doing for you is bringing things to the city that will help drive income, jobs, the starting of small businesses, which generate jobs for a lot of folks around here. It makes the city a much more desirable place to do business in when these businesses are included in the whole process. But I can tell you this, you know, that being on a firmer ground, it falls back to what your budget is. And I know that our budget now is about $750 million, and about $500 million of that is in operations. What you bring to the city, services and so on, you have to pay for. And so if you can establish partnerships with other entities, I think that that's where you've got to go. Also, trying to keep things in the tax structure that pay for those things. We often find there are things that are taken out, and we're accused of doing certain things with money, and we defer things and so on, but there most likely is a common reason for doing that. And so you can attract those things so they generate income for you, and eventually you will get your return on that investment. But I can tell you, it's not an easy thing. It's priorities, it's fiscal responsibility, it's making the hard decisions when you go through the budget as to what you really can afford. And there's a lot of demands placed on the council, and therefore I think that you need to prioritize, and then you need to look at public-private partnerships.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. I think this is a black and white question, and these are black and white answers when it comes to accounting. Both Shireen and Don mentioned fiscal responsibility and accountability. I think we are fiscally responsible. So it would be looking at the priorities and how do we shift? How do we phase in expenses as we need to? Also, I come from a current organization, former organization that looked at public-private partnerships as a way to fund programs where they made sense. You can't do that for everything, but you look for that. Also, I know that economies are moved by small and medium businesses, so I think the development of that would be very important.
All right, next, I want to thank all of you. We're going to go into, what's that? No, that was me. You already did the first one.
No, that's me.
That, I did.
No, that was my second.
I added Robin. I
have a really good question.
Okay. Vice Mayor Cubey has a question, and then so does Councilmember Keating.
So I want to kind of be Oprah and ask you what if you were a tree, what would you be? But then I'd say, what drought-resistant tree would you be? And then we get all nerdy, so let's not go there. But I want to do sort of a wavy gravy moment, and you know what wavy gravy, who that was, right, Don? We're almost the same generation. I want us to close our eyes, and maybe even the whole audience, do this little exercise with me. But I want to think about Tempe in 2040. And I want you to imagine that we're in the 44th year of a drought, that we're facing extreme heat, that we've had 30 days where temperatures exceed 120 degrees, where we have more intense monsoon storms, and that 1,000-year storms, while not commonplace, happen more often than not. So imagine Tempe 2040, and just in a few sentences, describe to me what your vision is for our city in 20 years. What would our city be like? What would you like to see our city be like?
We'll go ahead and start. Don, go ahead, and then we'll go right down the line.
Very much.
Sorry, I just looked
Wavy
up.
gravy, okay.
This was a supplanted question.
Well,
because we had
what I would like to see our city is our city continuing to be a place where people feel that they're in a community. Some of the issues that you mentioned there, you know, a 40-year drought, 120 degrees, those kinds of things. Those things take planning now. We have to anticipate our water needs, our electrical needs, way we build and design things. There's a lot will go into it, but it has to start now. It just can't be something we wait for until the worst shows up, which oftentimes is what happens. People think it's so far out, I won't be here, I won't worry about it, and so on. We have to worry about it. Our job, or your job as the council, is to worry about those things now. And that's what keeps you up at night, is thinking about all those things. When you have more information about what's going on, it's worrying sometimes, because these things are bigger oftentimes than you can imagine. But what you posed is a very real thing. We've seen changes in the weather patterns. We've seen changes in the lifestyles. And if we want to keep things the same, they won't really be the same, but we can manage that, I think, if we start now by starting to look at and doing deep considerations as to what's going on and thinking way out of that box, listening to those people who are out there in the future saying, this is what you're facing unless you do certain things. And I think that it's important to start those discussions now. It's not an easy thing to get started because most people say, I'm too busy, I've got to go do other things. But I think that it's important to have those discussions now. And as a council, to start to look at what we can do as a city to help manage those things. It might be changing building codes, it might be changing water laws, it might be changing in how we go about putting in infrastructure. So those are the things that I think we need to start looking at. But it is way down the line, but it's not down the line as far as a lot of people will be facing it.
Vice Mayor Cubey, I apologize, I don't know what wavy gravy is. Okay. But, okay. Oh. Okay. But I will attempt to answer your question. And some of the questions about solutions on water and scarce resources, I don't have the solutions to. But I would hope we would work together. We would be able to find the information and the knowledge to work on that. We have a great resource in Tempe at Arizona State University where people are working on that. And I know that the vein of your question was lighter, but the topic of your question is serious because it is something we should be thinking about in preparation because these are scenarios that could happen. One, in my 2040 Tempe, there's no more traffic. We're hovering now. And the construction, we will continue to build. We will have economic development, and our neighbors will be working with private partners in that development. And the buildings will be LEED certified. And we're going to move towards that. And we'll include that in the buildings and what sustainable structures can be built in to our future growth. I think that's important.
Thank you. I think we are looking at what is our sustainable future going to be as part of this. And Arlene's right. We have a resource right in town where we have a School of Sustainability. We also have a number of grants that have been given to that they have received due to hard work. But they're looking at actually the Phoenix metropolitan area because really the scenario you're talking about is not just Tempe. What we're talking about is the fact that we need to partner with our communities to plan ahead. We can't do this in isolation. Tempe could do everything right and still have these problems. We have a tree planting program right now that's underway to add more trees to the community, but we can do that. But if Mesa isn't doing something in Phoenix and Chandler, it's still not going to work by 2040 for us. So we can only do so much alone. And what we need to do is work in partnership with the communities to say, what is 2040 going to be? Are there things that we can be doing in our communities? The city of Tucson has programs where there's a benefit to putting in desert landscaping. So could we be encouraging people to do that, to use less water, to help them come up with some programs? SRP has programs already that deals with that. And the city does. You can go and actually get a tree, a drought-resistant tree that if you want to go plant that in your backyard. What can we do in terms of water usage? What can we do in terms of our community to try to help the urban heat island that we already have? That's part of the trees, but there's more to it than that. So to me, a lot of this is thinking that we don't live in isolation, that we actually need to look at different initiatives that are out there and work together to plan for it. As Don said, we can't start in 2035 for 2040. These are things that we have to start looking at now. And one of our biggest challenges will be having the community realize that this is something we have to do now, because very often people don't always look that far ahead. Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, we are going to ask for a 3-minute closing statement. And we are going to start with Shireen, and then Arlene, and then Don.
First of all, do I need to? Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the mayor and all of you council members for allowing me to interview for this position. I appreciate everything that you do. I know that you work extremely hard to try to make Tempe a better place. If I'm honored to be able to serve with you, I will work collaboratively with you to try to continue your approach to try to improve the city of Tempe in many ways. I seek this appointment because I know that we have challenges. We've heard about them tonight. We've heard about them at other city council members. And if we're going to remain the type of community that we're all proud to call home, we need to work together to problem solve. We need to be collaborative to problem solve. And I'm especially concerned with many of the issues that we've talked about. I want to balance resident and commercial needs. Human services, of course, we've talked about development and increased density neighborhoods. We've talked about affordable housing, transportation, but also the fun stuff. We need to have more arts and music in the parks. We need to have things that residents say, I'm going to go to TCA, or I'm actually just going to go down to Mill, and there's going to be somebody playing, a band playing on the street. I mean, I remember when things like that used to happen, when you could actually go have music on the street, and it was great. That was part of the enjoyment of just being able to walk around downtown Tempe. But we need to expand that as well. We need to have some of those things going on in the South Tempe and North Tempe. Very often there's a disconnect between those areas. And we need to try to have some of those opportunities in other parts of the city as well, where people can go and gather and say, let's go down because they're playing some music. They do that right now on Baseline at OPA. They have music that's there. I don't know if you've all been there, but it's great. Walt Richardson plays there a lot. And it's a great gathering place for people. So where we can get people together in Tempe, I think is important, and I'd love to see us do some more of that. In my professional life as a teacher, and in my community activities, I'm often trying to work on addressing issues, I should say, solving problems and achieving meaningful goals. And I'd like to continue to do that. I'd like to work together on decisions and on issues that are there and listen to you. I'd be coming in as a novice, and I would need to lean on the council to learn what your priorities are, what are your issues, and work closely with you in any way possible to try to address the challenges that we are confronting. With only 1 year, I'm ready to jump in on any of the issues that are needed, be supportive of the existing programs that you have, as well as the other programs that we might be able to implement. Probably most importantly for you to know about me is that I bring a thoughtful perspective to governance. I believe in fiscal responsibility, but I also believe in doing what's right for the residents of Tempe, because I am one, and I've had my family here. So as a teacher, I'm keenly aware of the issues that are in our community that affect young people. I also teach people of all different ages, and I'm very passionate about addressing any of these. So I hope that you can find it in your way to support me. Thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Chin, Arlene.
When you put out the call for service, that you needed someone to apply and serve for 14 months in this position, 49 of us submitted applications. I have to tell you that I was thrilled and very proud of 48 of my neighbors that they stepped up. That was the first thing I told people at work. 49 Tempeans applied. That's how we operate in Tempe. That is very reflective of our community. We are involved, we are active, and we care. I'm very proud to be a part of this community. I seek to serve because this community has provided a rich experience for me. I have learned from so many people. I've participated in organizations and experiences that have shaped me and my worldview. My core values align pretty closely to the values of Tempe. I respect people, I'm inclusive, I believe in integrity, and I'm open. And I want to get involved. I seek to serve, and I would embrace the hard work necessary to work with staff, the community members, and alongside each one of you. I hope you will support my appointment for this role. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Don Casano.
I also would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this evening, answer your thoughtful questions, and look to the future. My life in Tempe has been one of community service. My life in work has been one of community service. And I think that's where I want to continue to go, is providing community service. I have what I believe is a track record of doing just that, making difficult decisions, working for consensus for all of us, listening to everyone on the council in the discussions, the deliberations, seeking out information outside the council from the public as to what interests them, what concerns them, and putting all those together and coming up with a better plan for making this city the best place to live, work, and to raise a family. And that's been my mantra all of these years. I want to continue to live in Tempe, I want to continue to play in Tempe, and I want to continue having new families moving into this community and continuing to build on that whole community feel that we have here. I think I can continue to do that. I'm ready to step up to the plate right now. There's a number of complex issues you're facing. The first one is dealing with this budget that's coming up, but there's infill, there's all this development going on, there's any number of things. But I've experienced a lot of those things before. They took a little different form, but stepping up to the plate, deciding to go forward on projects like Rio Salado, downtown redevelopment, transportation issues involving the light rail, the streetcar, and those are the kinds of things that I want to continue working on in the year that we would have together. And I respect what you do because it's not an easy job. I didn't have to deal with email when I was on the council, but I've had to deal with it ever since. And I can tell you it's a tremendous load when everybody can get a hold of you at any time of the day or night. So I commend you for that work, and I want to join you and do that, and I would appreciate if you would give me your considerations tonight in your deliberations. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Let's give the applicants a round of applause. Thank you for your dedication. All right. Thank you very much. With that, before we go on to the next part of the agenda, I'm going to ask, you guys can sit down. Yeah, you guys can legally. I was going to ask, for those that have not spoken prior to the meeting, if you have any comments that you would like to add to the candidates that have run, now's the time to do so. I ask that you keep it to a minute. So if you guys would like to do that, just come forward, state your name, place of residence. Anybody? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to future agenda items. Is there any future agenda items from the council? Seeing none. The next item on our agenda is our committee of the whole. We do not have any items for direction on committee of the whole, except we do have any items for consideration. We don't have any of those. Any items in progress? Any council members want to give an update on the items in progress? Yes, Vice Mayor Cubey?
Just quickly, just like doing one for the team, removing 2 working groups from our list of assignments, and one is the contractors checklist, which has been resolved, and the other is the youth vaping outreach and education work group. And I want to thank so much Councilmember Adams for her help. Originally, we were looking at a tobacco 21 ordinance where we could raise the age of tobacco products being sold to consumers from 18 to 21 years, and discovered, much to our chagrin, that in this county, the enforcement of the 18-year-old age limit is managed on that level, and they weren't willing to modify their efforts. It would have been a tremendous cost, about $360,000 to our city to accomplish that. And but we turned our efforts to working with ASU and with the Tempe High School District, and I'm proud to say that ASU recently passed a campus-wide vaping ban. And the Tempe Union High School District students are developing their own peer-driven programs. We reached out to Tempe Union High School District and asked if we could be of any help with social media. We continue to have that engagement with them, and we'll work with them in the future. And then there's SB 1147, which is for the legislature. It looks like it's going to fail, and it's probably a good thing, because though it does raise the tobacco, the purchase of tobacco products to age from 18 to 21, it also pretty much is a handout to the nicotine and cigarette industry and takes away a city's right to control any kind of local decision making. So it looks like that one might fail. I hope it does. But we're looking for maybe next year's session to have a T21 ordinance passed statewide. But that's not happening this year. So we'd like to close that committee, that working group. And I want to thank so much our aide, Kristen Gwynn, for helping with this project. And Elizabeth, Nikki, Vanessa Cuevas from the police department, and Mike Horn, thank you so much for all your help.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, I look to the city manager. You have any announcements?
No announcements, thank you.
I do have one announcement. This morning, I was fortunate to go to one of our schools in Tempe. And I want to say congratulations to all the schools in Tempe who have received an A+ for school excellence designation from the Arizona Education Foundation. These schools excel in teaching, learning, community building, and leadership. I'm very proud of all of them, having grown up in Tempe, attended all the schools from Tempe Elementary to McClintock High School in Arizona State. This is really exciting. So I want to recognize Arredondo Elementary School, Wagner Elementary School, Carine de la Mariposa, and Ward Traditional Academy. Thank all the teachers, the school board members. This is really an important element. And the reason why I say this we heard a lot tonight from the applicants for the vacant position. We talked about community services tonight. We are a community. The cornerstone of our community are neighborhoods. And cornerstone of neighborhoods, it was mentioned earlier by one of the applicants, we have a school and a park every square mile. This is important. And this morning, seeing 5 schools in our community being designated the A+, and right after this, I went to the groundbreaking with Councilman Navarro at the Novus District. Companies look to locate, to raise their family, set their roots, and build on the quality of life. Having a good K-12 school system is very important. So again, I want to thank all the educators and our school district members for what they've done to make our community even better. With that, our next meeting is May 16th. We are adjourned. We have an executive meeting we have to get to upstairs. Thank you.